Spartans, prepare for glory!
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 8 of the Spartan Training Ground podcast. As usual, I'm Robert Wilson with the prodigy himself, Andrew Taylor. Andrew, what's up, man?
You know, living the dream. Excited to be here.
And tonight we have a special guest. No, it's not Dave McMillan. He's trying. We'll get to him eventually. Tonight we've got the traveling goof, Pierre, the data keeper himself. Pierre,
Woohoo!
What's going on, man?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Excited to be on here.
Now, we appreciate you taking the time to come chat with us and also all the work you do in putting together data, because I think that really helps people get a good snapshot of the meta as they prepare for events, and you are leading the charge on that. So thank you for all of your work and effort on that.
Absolutely. I'm newer to Overpower, and so I felt that getting into this, as much data as I can get, as much as I can find out what other people are playing, has been super helpful to me. And once I take all the time to pull that all together, I like to send it out to you guys too, so you have the same amount of stuff to work with. So a lot of top eights, a lot of legacy stuff, as much modern as I can get, and hopefully we get more of that data from LRG moving forward too.
Amen to that. Very helpful stuff.
Absolutely. So just kind of setting the table here, like, how do you both use data when you're preparing for events? How do you think people should take and parse this data, as they get ready for, the Columbus and Canadian regionals, the OP Cup, and, whatever? What are your kind of thoughts on the usefulness of the data and kind of what you can get from it to really help in your preparation?
Well, I think I can start off, since when I first showed up into a tournament scene, I'd never played an Overpower tournament before and had no idea what to expect. So that Seattle regional was just completely raw. I'm sure you can speak to the same. You might have had a little bit more idea of what was going on in Seattle, but everyone brings something different to the table, which is really exciting. And so afterwards, I had started seeing what some of the people were playing. And as I was gathering some of the top 8 type of data and what the winners were playing, I started tracking that to find out like what trends, what combinations of characters are people using that seem to be really strong? What colors are they using? What kind of things are they playing that maybe I can look into? I don't really like to mimic other people's decks, but I like to at least have an idea of what might be out there, what I might be facing. So if you want, I'll pull up some data here actually with something that I've kind of put together and color coded a little bit for what I found actually throughout the entire season of Overpower, just to kind of get an idea of some of the colors of what we might be encountering.
Yeah, and just to kind of set the table, these are the 5 regionals, or the last season 0 and then the first one from this season. Is that what we're looking at?
So I've got 5 tournaments up. The first 3 are the first 3 regionals. And as you scroll down, regional 4 and into the nationals itself.
Okay.
But just a lot of different, like what the top 8 decks of what we're seeing are.
So much brute force everywhere. It's a plague.
Hey, I saw Sheriff of Nottingham in that picture.
That's right. He's pretty good.
Who would play Sheriff? Man,
I mean, that kind of tells it all right there. Like, you just look at the color scheme. Like, it's almost all orange and yellow. Like the powerhouse characters of this set are, like, it kind of like trended. I thought it trended away from combat as we went, but that's not really true. Like, combat was everywhere. Leo's everywhere. Zoro's everywhere. They got some good support guys too. I'm noticing a big lack of not just brute force, but also the intellect characters that show up a lot are all support. I mean, you got lots of Joan, lots of Jane, and then some Sherlocks, and that's pretty much it. So those are nice to sprinkle in, but yeah, as far as like dominating powerhouses, we're seeing a lot of energy and a lot of combat.
You can tell by looking at this, like, who the tent poles of the sets are, like the characters that people are building around. Leonidas, Wicked Witch, Sun Wukong, and that's kind of it. Almost every team in this top 8, or all of these top 8s, are using one of those characters. Then you have a couple with, like Cthulhu in there and, a couple random ones, but the majority of them, Cthulhu, Witch, some Wukong, or Leonidas, are in almost all of these. I'm looking for a list that doesn't have one of those characters. And
Yeah, I think we
it's
have Dan MacArthur with Morgan, Baby Mob, Sherlock, and Raw. This is kind of the only exception at the Nats top 8.
and
Yeah, or even Zeus has a couple of decks with that too. But I mean, if you look at it too, even with all the yellow that's on there, if you removed Wicked Witch, there'd be a whole lot less yellow.
That's very
So they'd be
true.
right there with
Mhm.
Brute Force.
Yeah,
yeah, combat. I mean, especially the first few tournaments really just, dominated. I mean, it was kind of right the easy place to go to, like the tier, like the level one of kind of character building and exploration, like, Leonidas and Zorro. That's only 3 extra points. They're both bringing 8s. They're both bringing team defense, big attacks, venture. Like they kind of, on the surface, like kind of have it all between the two of them. So that's, you can see why people started there. And then Billy the Kid gives you 2 points back, and then a reserve character that can actually do some damage. So it's easy to see why people started that way in the first few tournaments.
Well, and I think there's a natural gravitation towards combat in this ERB set as well, especially as you look at the spread of what the characters have. You've got a 16-point combat, you've got a 17-point combat, you have a ton of 18s, you've got 20, 21, 22. Compare that to any other color, and you don't have that type of spread. I mean, Brute Force has got 22, 820, bunch of 18s, and a couple of 16s. Energy doesn't really have anything under 18 points, and that's Carson if he's in the front. So there's a lot of natural leans for this, that when you're building decks, you're almost going to be not forced into a single lane and by any means, but you're going to be guided into a certain types of deck construction. So it makes perfect sense to me to see those first couple of tournaments really be stacked with combat.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Andrew, I know people are going to want your thoughts on this. Looking at nationals, there's no Leonidas or Zorro in the top 8. And we see 5 Wicked Witch decks. 5 decks with Wicked Witch. 6. 1,
6,
2, 3, 4, 5,
6.
6.
75%.
Yeah. So why do you, talk about that shift and your thoughts on that?
I mean, Leo's great, but I think another thing to point out is like how many Jones are there. Like Leo's incredible, but he's like the top end of what's fair, because you can put like 2 8s on him and he has the really nice avoid, but he's not getting over 8, which is like kind of unfair. You're breaking stuff as soon as you're throwing 9s and 10s all the time. And then also Harness the Wind is pretty unfair. Like that's just, I win the hand. If you stay in, I'm going to kill 1 or 2 of your guys. So, I mean, I think the pivot was not just like Leo's in so many decks, but like I'm pretty sure, according to LRG, he actually didn't make that many top 8s. Like he was in like 44% of decks or something. I might have the number wrong, but he was in so many freaking decks. So like, yeah, we're gonna see him at the top. Like he's very good. He's very solid, but he's also like I said, the top end of fair. Um, right? Like that 6 can get you if you're not expecting it, I guess. But you kind of know what's happening and when. You could just kind of ignore him, and they're often, people will keep that 8 on him to protect him until like maybe the end of the round, and if somebody runs, then they're duping on it. I don't know. I still like him a lot, but I still think he's the top end of fair. He's not shifting attacks to everyone, and bringing the same amount of venture for less points, almost the same amount that Witch can do. He's not doing crazy stuff like Joan can do with EFL. Um, yeah, I think that's the the meat and potatoes of it.
I mean, looking at, kind of the nationals, you see Wicked Witch a lot, but you also see Joan. You see Joan in half of the decks. I'm going to assume that last team is Joan and not Jane twice. I'm assuming it's Joan, Cthulhu,
right.
Sheriff, and then Jane. So you're
Correct.
seeing Joan in 4 of the lists, and that's, like you said, they're just kind of, and we've talked about this before, like those game warping cards where the game just kind of revolves around them and just kind of changes the entire texture of it. Harness the Wind, EFL, those types of cards, and it looks like people were building around those cards and those characters and having success at nationals.
Yeah. Also, Leo's pretty slow. Like he has the big chunky hits, but I'm noticing with nationals his speed is pretty devastating. Like, I mean, my deck had Morgan and Joan that can both throw bonus attacks. There's 4 Jones, 2 Cthulhus, like that's speed, all day long. Even Dan with Baby Mob, they're just a straight shotgun character. The only who's the only slow-ish? We have Jane, Witch, Mina, Morgan. Was that
Sheriff, maybe?
Felipe? Was that Felipe's build? Jane, Witch, Mina, Morgan with land. I think that was Felipe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was all ladies with
that's
land.
right.
Yeah, but he's kind of making up for the lack of speed because of the venture pressure and the extra hit, as well as the ability to like the KO the last round thing, which is relevant. It doesn't matter if you win venture if I take all your guys. But aside from that, you're just seeing speed everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Land of Time, forgot another one of those kind of build around cards that, changes kind of the rules of engagement.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to see, the juxtaposition between Legacy and Modern, where Modern is all about, these cards that change the game and this, these chain attacks and defense is really kind of a premium, and your characters are going to get beat up, versus Legacy, where, battle sites let you really kind of turtle up and team defense lets you kind of turtle up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool to see such contrast between the formats, almost being like two completely different games and two different ways to approach, whichever format you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, LRG definitely talked about that. They wanted stuff to hit. They wanted there to be action and excitement and characters to go down, and it's definitely happening.
Yeah. The fact that there's no 9 or less avoids as a non-1 per deck is, I think, just a fantastic choice, and I hope that moves forward because it just gives so much more teeth to all those attacks coming against your opponent.
So let me ask you this, and interested in both of your thoughts on this, and I guess I'll give mine. So looking at, I think most people are going to look to the kind of top 8 from nationals as they prepare for the Columbus regional. So if you are looking at this, do you go with the grain and play a Wicked Witch, Joan of Arc style deck, or do you attack it? And if you're going to attack it, how are you going to attack it?
Go for it, Pierre.
All right. So just for everyone out there, definitely not at the nationals caliber level. So I'm kind of attacking this more from the middle of the pack. EFL and Harness the Wind are absolutely devastating cards. And so having a defense to those, having some sort of answer, mainly in a negate or one of the remainder of game, remainder of battle wipes, seems to be extremely important. It can get you out of a lot of scrapes there. And the second thing that I note is that, like Andrew said, this is all speed. It started off, everything was slow, a little bit more calculated. But you have to be able to deal with speed or either stop their attacks or prevent them from landing those hits and having the defense to weather their attacks. And so those two elements would definitely be something I'd consider looking forward. How do I get the card advantage back after spending all these cards on defense? And how do I make sure that I'm landing hits back against my opponent after he just threw 3, 4, 5 hits my way?
Definitely, yeah. I think there's a couple different things you could do, a couple different strategies. We already see a lot of Jane in the front line. I think a character like her or Van Helsing, that have the wipe, obviously is a natural counter. We still haven't seen a lot of Van Helsing, but I think he's kind of underrated. I mean, characters like Sherlock, he has multiple ways. He has the offensive negate, defensive negate to deal with those tricky specials. He can also, if he doesn't have those, he's got a 4 multi make additional. Like multis is a good way to get through all this shifting shenanigans. You start piling up hits and you save a couple of multis, they can't land anywhere. So, I mean, that's one potential countermeasure. But I've had some success lately in the online leagues by just doing just massive venture. If you just have, if you have enough to keep your guys alive, and you can push it in 2-3 hands. I mean, like if you're using guys like, Leo, Arthur, John Carter, stuff like that, and you're just landing ridiculous, like multiple 8s, like you can put yourself in situations sometimes where it doesn't matter that they're going to take a character or two because the game's over, you win venture. So I think there's a kind of a fine balance there because you can't just go all in on the venture guys because then you're missing a lot of support stuff. But I do think that is a strategy. Either pile on the multis or just don't care about KOs and just drown them in venture points and you win.
Yeah, I like looking at characters like Three Musketeers, like you said, multis, and then just so much venture that there's really nowhere to put it. Uh, Sherlock, always great, can negate stuff. I think people are maybe also kind of sleeping on the event that clears cards like EFL. I mean, it's not going to hit Harness the Wind, but to to take out that even have the potential to take out that EFL, like some number of times you're gonna hit that, like late game after they've played EFL, and the earlier they play EFL, like the more likely your odds are of that event, taking it out. And for the low cost of giving them 3 venture, I mean, that's they get +2 on each card that they do. So you're kind of saving yourself 2 cards there at that point. So I think, that's an event I would expect to see more of in that mission set. I don't know why more people haven't been running it. I think King Arthur could be another option, give you a little more team defense. And
And
then,
the 7 that if it lands, it wipes that stuff too. Yep.
Yep.
exactly. Yeah. So I mean it's more situational, but you can get some team defense, you get the venture bonus. So, I mean, you can kind of put together a team that can be um, more defensive than kind of the average team, and then you can kind of try and pick up some of the other things you need, along the line somewhere else. I mean, so I guess I'll start on this one. What am I going to play in Columbus? I'll probably, unless Doug starts blowing me out whenever I show up to, you know, weeklies at Heroes and Games, I'll probably go with the grain. And like I've been looking at Morgan, Joan, Witch, and Raw in reserve. It's kind of what I've been playing around with.
Mhm.
Will that be what I run? Maybe we'll see. We'll see how it does. But having some ideas. Like I like the idea of Van Helsing. Having a negate, having the JW special, in an offsuit. I think I agree with you. I think he's kind of a character that should probably get more looks than he does. But
It's pricey.
uh,
You could get a Nemo for the same price or a
yeah,
Zorro.
It's tough.
Well,
It's like, what do you need? And I think that's maybe, but if you look at Zorro and Nemo, like against, Joan and Wicked Witch, I'd probably rather have Van Helsing,
Oh, for
right?
sure.
To
Yeah,
to
against
deal
them.
with those specials. So I think like the meta has shifted. Like if you're talking about in a vacuum, yeah, Zorro and Nemo are probably better characters than Van Helsing. But like when you're looking at it right now and seeing what people are playing and what's doing well tournament after tournament, maybe Van Helsing is the better choice
Yeah.
at that 20-point slot.
Well,
So
there's another point to speak of there too with, Van Helsing brings a little bit of tricks, but you're looking at the Jane Porters too from that last Nationals, and that gives you another option between Jane Porter, Sherlock, even Carson's got it to stop your opponent's chains altogether. Just playing one of those, my character and your character can attack. And if
Mhm.
it's your Chumpy character and you're playing it on their Morgan or on their Joan, and now all their speed is just evaporated for that turn, there could be another way to get ahead of that. But of course, that requires you have initiative. But I think there's other ways of disrupting that speed that, you know, you can bring to the table, whether that's Van Helsing, whether that's Jane Porter, Sherlock. So I could definitely see some more intelligence related counters coming up to the OP Cup and the Columbus Regional.
That's a great point. Also, I think it's kind of silly to say out loud, but Dracula has to the last man, stops all cards with the word teammate. If that was against my Nationals deck, he probably would have crushed me. No Morgan 3 bonus attacks, no Joan 4, no Joan defensive card, no allies, no teamworks. We're gonna fight, fisticuffs, fair, one attack at a time.
I mean, that's like why we talk about this now, right? Like, I mean, we kind of talk about this pretty frequently, like what are people playing and how to attack the meta, but maybe it is time for a character like Dracula, like looking at the top eights from Nationals, right? Morgan, Joan, Witch, all have T cards that say teammate. Cthulhu, those two, looking at this top eight from Nationals, all of these teams have characters that are, teammate is prominently on some of their best specials. Like you could really generate some card advantage, like pseudo card advantage, in those pivotal battles. And also sitting there with a negate, a non-numerical negate that just sits on the battlefield is like there's a reason that Dracula is kind of a powerhouse in Legacy, and it
Hmm.
hasn't really translated to Modern just simply because, usually you're stopping like the team defense, but maybe we're at a point in Modern where that could work. I don't know. Maybe I'll throw something together as like a second deck to try and like the with the grain deck and the against the grain deck
Yeah,
and kind of see how it
there's something
goes.
there. And even his non-numerical negate that can also another card that can deal with EFL and harness.
Mm-hmm.
Just need to bring some venture with him.
Yeah, maybe it's so. Yeah, who is the cheapest venture that you can bring if you bring? I mean, Three Musketeer, right? You probably have to choose between Three Musketeers or Van Helsing. So
Mm-hmm.
you can't obviously take them both, and then you have to start making up points somewhere.
Yeah. Three
So
Musketeers and Robin Hood, or Van Helsing and Robin Hood. You get a couple 7 combats, some juice, some double attacks. Robin Hood brings card advantage. Also protects Drac, keeps him alive. I don't know. You got a couple of things you can do there.
yeah, and then you have to do a 16-point character
Yeah.
as your last one. So I mean, I think that's one of the things that's been holding Dracula back, being 22 points. I mean,
Yeah.
I see why they were cautious with that, given what he's done in Legacy, but maybe 21 or 20 would have been more appropriate here. But
For
that's
sure.
that's kind of the benefit of, an extra year of kind of running it through the field.
Who knows what there is the evergreen factor of like future characters may have crazy busted cards that say teammate, and like then all of a sudden boom he pops back up as a viable option, or some cheap venture characters that can pair well with him grid wise. Like who knows?
Yeah, Dracula's cards are only going to get better, right, as time goes on. So
Well, especially as he gets teammates that have more brute force and intellect. There's a handful of them with this set, but they're kind of limited in nature as well. So if he gets more intelligence venture characters or something like that to pair, it might be more worth spending his 22 points on the team.
yeah, you get robot at
Mhm.
the 8 intellect stat and 20 threat level, assuming he stays that way. So I
think
won't go into any more than what's been revealed for that. Those I've seen that image floating around.
Yeah.
Showed a recent interview
they?
where they released a few more arts, and Robot was 21 there. But he's got a killer special that lets you play non-numericals for 2 teammates, kind of like Jones 4, but for non-numericals. So that could help him out, but that's down the road a little bit.
Hmm. Any kind of final thoughts on this list and kind of what we think coming up for the Columbus and Canadian regionals before we move on to kind of our tier list fight here?
I hope if we see some new stuff. That's all I'm really looking forward to. Some sort of meta breaker, fresh. I don't want to see Witch Wukong dominate the top 8. I want to see, Van Helsing plus whoever that's just smoking them, kicking their ass. That I think that would be awesome. I want to see, you know, like a spread of reserve characters, much like we saw in Nats, where there's no more than 2 of the same in the top 8 instead of 6 Billy the Kids and a couple of Janes. Like, I mean, yes, it's the low hanging fruit, but it's also boring at this point in the meta. So I just want something fresh.
I mean, getting to see 2 Sheriff of Nottinghams in the top 8 of nationals was pretty sweet. Like,
Seattle represent.
yeah. So there is still space to be explored. There are still ways to counter the meta. I mean, you know, uh, certainly don't want people to get discouraged and think they have to play Witch or Sun Wukong or, Joan to win, because I really don't think that's the case.
Agree.
Okay, moving on. So one of the things we've been talking about with characters, who should you use? Who's good? Who is the S tier? Who is, strong, who is maybe situational, but, kind of depending on the next set coming out with Skybound could be, great characters to kind of reassess. And so we were going to talk tier lists. You guys can play along at home. You can judge us. You can disagree with us. Feel free to comment. Feel free to, shout angry threats at us in the Discord.
do
If your
comment.
favorite character, we rate him as a C. Maybe there are some industrial angry mob fans still cursing Andrew's name out there.
It's so generous of you. Give them a C.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
you got,
let's
what
do
was
it.
he, like F in your tier,
Oh,
your
yeah.
last tier list?
Oh yeah.
Maybe it's changed. Maybe you've come
Yeah.
around.
So I think for the audience at home, we're gonna try and do a tier list in a vacuum. So not just based on data we've seen this tournament, but also a little bit of future predictions and how we think the characters would stand if they perhaps had better accomplices that are, in future sets type of deal. Rate them on their own.
Yeah, and just kind of like we talked about with Dracula and Van Helsing, you should always be reassessing characters, for the current meta, for the current sets, or for what's happening. So, like I said, Industrial Angry Mob F in the past, maybe B tier one day.
A whole lot of universes coming next set.
Yeah, getting a potential 3 or 4 for 1 is pretty big game. And we're looking at a tier maker, the ERB tier maker. I think if you're looking for a list of this to play at home, you can hit up Pierre in the Discord.
you guys can come up with your own tier lists and throw them on, and we'll see what we think about it. See what's different.
All right, baby mob. What are we thinking, Goof?
All right, so Baby Mob, 16-point Angry Mob, is one of my absolute favorite characters in the set because you could use just about all their specials in a single round and then just not care about them anymore. And that single round is going to just be absolutely fantastic because you can chain any characters and allies into their 3, make 2 additionals, and you can potentially throw their 7 and any character 7 or both their 7s as 9s. And it can be very, very hard to answer that 16-point character. So I think there's a lot of potential. Anything that's got brute force or energy and needs a little speed to counteract some other slow characters could use a deck with the Angry Mob. And because of their cheap cost and dual 6s, I've put them at A, very strong. What do you guys think?
I agree with all your points. I think in addition, we also have flexibility with Spartan because their combat can go from a 4 to an 8. They are also great with Dracula's Armory. They can get to 9s with 2 different suits. They're super cheap. They got phenomenal 1 per decks. Like you said, they're just a shotgun, unload and dump. But I think the main thing holding them back is no defensive card of any kind, which all the mobs suffer from. I would kind of put them high end of B tier personally. I don't quite think they're in A, but I see the merit for thinking A.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had them in B tier as well. Yeah, I think they're kind of a one-dimensional character.
Mm-hmm.
They have a purpose, they do that purpose, and they don't really do more than that. I mean, I don't think any character is, as flexible as say Joan, but I'm looking for a little more. I like it your 16 slot, like they're always an option to consider. I've got them in B as well.
I think Swarm Them's kind of weak too. I've seen some people play it and it's okay, but I personally don't like it.
If it was a
I feel
remainder
like
of game, and
Oh
then
yeah,
you're
then it's huge.
guaranteed to at least get something off of that, it would be
Yep.
a very different card. But the fact that
Yep.
they can just avoid it, you might lock out a couple of really nice place cards. You might lock out almost nothing. It's just that one is definitely situational, but
Mm-hmm.
they got strength and they got speed. So it's not nothing.
yeah, that card is always read better than it played. Like you see it and it's like, this is kind of disappointing.
And they can have a duplicate of it, but 2 of something bad is not any better.
I will say though, I love running the red event with them because you get +2 to all actions and you get -4 to cumulative KO.
Mm-hmm.
And that negative side is irrelevant for the mob. They're still got more hit points than any other character. And now you're throwing, 6, 8, 6, 8, 8, 9, 10, gigantic attacks. So something fun to consider with them, but
Yeah, that's a good
doesn't
combo.
help them out much in terms of defense or any sort of utility.
All right, Industrial Mob.
Oh boy. Well, I didn't put an F tier on this, so we can't rate them as F 2 times in a row. So no matter what, they're already moving up.
I think I like their 1 per decks, and comparatively, they actually do have a pretty nice grid for 18. 4, 5, 7, 3, I think.
Yeah.
They got great synergy with either of those, the boost home bases that I love so much. Their 1 per deck, the 8 multi's really, really nice, especially if it hits. Like, it's so annoying. +2 defense to the whole team. The thing that I'm not like a huge fan of is that's more likely to hit the later in the round you get, and it's losing value every turn that you're not getting the +2 defense. But it's still an 8 multi, so like even without the secondary fact, it's amazing. And then this set, the Destroy All Placed Universe, like again, totally situational. I've come against them plenty of times in fun games, and it gets 0 or 1 card. And it's really not that scary. But if you're starting to see Spartan Training Ground everywhere, or Drax Armory, or in the next set, all these advanced universes or Raws, like, you got to give that card the respect it deserves. So, again, 18 points for no defensive card, that's pretty rough. But I'd bump him up to C.
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 I was gonna go D.
Still
Or-
putting them at the bottom, huh?
Yeah, I think they're a character to evaluate in the future. Especially since they have such a unique effect in terms of discarding all place universe cards. But I just kind of don't see any reason to use them right now.
Right now,
So
yeah.
yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I definitely balance between C and D, and their grid is definitely a weakness with ERB for sure, because of some of those pairings don't really match up. And if you're playing Brute Force, there's a lot of really strong 18-point characters to use instead of them, because these guys bring a lot of just power. They lose some of the baby mom speed, and have slightly more a tiny level of defense and utility with their 1 per dex. I think there's reasons to play them. I think they've got a niche, and they've probably got more like venture cards, maybe not quite the levels that Sheriff has, but they've got a lot that they can just pump out. And depending on the decks, if you have a way to get them even faster, you could see them worthwhile. But with ERB, I don't think they're really, you don't need to play them in too many ways. So I would say that they're playable. They're, situational for the future.
In the future, yeah.
I wouldn't call them terrible, because, if you're running a brute force combat deck, you've got a pretty good set of tertiary stats. There's no ones that are going to be holding you back. They've got 19 points. So I think there's something there, but someone's got to prove it first, because they haven't shown up to a single tournament deck.
Yeah. They gain value in the future for sure.
I call them C, but where do you guys think you want to land?
It was 2-1 C. We'll put
2
them
to
in
1.
C.
All right.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
But ERB only, F tier. F tier. I stand by it.
Yeah, I can
So-
agree with that.
Big Mob next.
Big Mob. I have them in a new deck. They're a heck of a lot of fun. Same thing. You got to pair them with a whole lot of defense. I think when we get this new suite of any heroes or battlegrounds or whatever they're calling it, that's something that with the 30 hit points, they're great with any sort of shifting. You can dump all the any power hits on them, and they're kind of like the mummy where they almost ignore them. But still, 20 points for no defensive card. You're really kind of leveraging on the dual 5s and the 8 that they have. You also kind of have to play them with Baker Street, because otherwise their 1 per deck goes from annoying to phenomenal in Baker Street. Like, you'd still run it either way, but it feels like leaving value on the table. And then there's 7 intellect, which catches people off guard. If they were meta, everyone would know it and would be prepared for it. But because they're not, that sneaky 7, you can't use cards with intelligence icon to attack for remainder of battle, not just intellect attacks. So I've had battles where that hits and, you had 5 attacks to throw and now you have 1. So that can be a round ending card. That being said, they're still 20 points. They suffer from lack of brute force support in this set. They're not great. They're not terrible. I stick them in C also. It's above industrial, but in C.
So I was definitely looking at them between B and C as well. They've got a lot going on, and you mentioned that they don't have a lot of brute force support, and actually they have fewer than everyone else, because half the cards you'd want to pair them with are the other angry mobs.
So
trying to
true.
get things back, and you can't. Maybe you're gonna have to put Hyde in there and have another slow character instead, and that really sets you back. So if they had a different, 16-point character that maybe brought some defense, or even a 17, I could see them being used more, because they're a sponge that can dish it out and has a lot of utility options as well. So I had him placed at B just for the kind of the long term, where if we find other things that can actually pair with them instead of the extremely limited ERB cast, that 7 reveal hand with Baker Street's going to be incredible. That handful of 7s still, like they have a good kit, non-defensive kit, but they've got some speed, they've got strong attack, and they've got some utility. So I feel like they can slot in, and dual 5s definitely helps out.
Yeah, 3 different color attacks plus the multi, so they're nice little rainbow.
Yep.
Yeah, I would put them in C. I think in terms of this set, you see a lot of combinations that you want to naturally pair the characters with, like Leonidas and Zorro, Witch and Joan. Mob doesn't have that, and neither do a lot of the brute force characters. So I think, for that reason, I'd put them lower. I think once Skybound comes out, there'll be a character you want to reassess, because having that 8 and being a character that can be kind of one of your big offensive threats, at only 20 points, I think is something you may want to consider. But yeah, for now, it's just, what do you do with them? Like they're not good enough to really like be your anchor of your team. So, I think they're your second character. So, for that reason, I'd put them in C.
I could see put them with Cthulhu. Then you have a backup 8, and your grids match pretty well. But ERB doesn't have anything going for those other 2 characters, and it's going to be a tough sell to really have them carry anything else, regardless of when you're thinking about them in the future.
Yeah, then you're kind of locked into either Jane or Hyde, and then whatever 18-point character you want to do, maybe someone like Anubis,
Mhm.
who's up next.
Oh, Anubis.
I
Go
would
ahead.
put him in. Yeah, I always had him in C, and he's playable solely because he has a reserve guard, and he has a couple of the better specials, like Way of the Heart. So I'd put him in C, but I've never used him and walked away being like, yes, like I am glad I have Anubis on my team. He's okay.
See, I've played Anubis a number of times, Legacy and Modern, and I initially gravitated towards that Book of the Dead, and half the time that doesn't seem to trigger for me. So, like, every time I think about putting him in as a reserve, it doesn't really work out. What I have found recently is a very situational approach where you put him in an Asclepion deck, and his ability to save someone from death actually pairs well with Asclepion, and he's got a few other triggers there as well. But you're still left with a character that has potentially half the game. You're got these defenses that you're not going to use, especially if you place it. Your opponent's going to punish you for that, and you don't have a lot of venture from him. So he's definitely, has some interesting quirks to him, but that he really has to fit into the right deck to even consider taking him. So I'm definitely on the camp of C, playable, situational maybe, but not much more than that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you guys. He was in the early version of my Nats deck. He was my reserve guy. That was I was chucking the Weighing of the Heart and the 5 half multi, and ended up moving away from him to Sheriff just because of all the shifting. Because Weighing of the Heart's pretty lame against Harness. The 5 half multi, we got to talk about Anubis Gate. Like that gets through a fairy. That's something. But yeah, no, I totally agree. There's just the Shepherd of the Damned. His defensive protects, keeps someone from death, is like such a cool thematic card. The problem is like are you really going to run multiple copies of it, because you're not going to get value until you're in like the second battle, and that could realistically be the third or fourth hand if you're playing chicken back and forth. So, and then are you going to only run one? You might not have it when you need it. Book of the Dead is also like Pierre said, it seems awesome, but the later you draw it, the less value it gives you. And if you draw it early, it's a pass a turn minus one card. So like, it all seems great, but yeah, I think Weighing of the Heart and the 5 half multi are what bring him to C, because if he had crappy 1 per decks on top, he would be F, but those really elevate him to at least mid.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Billy the Kid, I think we're probably all going to be in agreement here that he's probably an A tier. I mean, he gives you 2 points back, only 7 at 17 threat level, and 2 specials that you can play from reserve. One that you can even kind of save as your last card and snipe an extra mission, and I'll make you famous. So I think he's pretty easily an A.
Yep, he's also underrated up front. Like I've seen Sean Valentine especially has used him to great effect up front. And then also David Schmidt did the same thing. He kind of made a energy combat deck by playing pals with him, so he could protect Zeus with those power cards, kind of a frontline Deathbird thing. I think that's underrated, and yeah, which is actually not a 1 per deck, which is pretty wild. I just learned the other day. +2 on all actions against an opponent's 8 ranker, turns him into a little mini assassin. Now all of a sudden he can chuck 9s, you know. It's something. He brings a lot for his little point. And then regulators, you know, like being able to fetch power card, and then I don't remember if that's the same one that also lets him, whenever you lose venture, you draw an extra card. Like, he's got some stuff. He's great in the front and the back. And yeah, like Rob said, the most important thing, he's the only 17 that has a 7 stat and playable cards from reserve. Like, 2 things tipping him over the edge. So yeah, he's absolutely A tier.
Not to mention that grid 4-3-4. I mean, for a reserve, you can't ask for much better than that, because he steps up, and when you're getting into power pack, there's not going to be really any dead cards in that low grid, which is going to help you out a ton.
Yep.
Definitely A tier.
All right, Captain Nemo. I'll start with this with you. I think he's a pretty easy A. He's got defense. He's got big attacks, a 6 and a 7. I mean, I think he's got a couple unique specials in terms of locking out specials on a character, and then some team defense, which is a premium in modern right now. So I think he's a solid A.
Yeah.
Yep. I like A. I mean, I initially had him in my first tier list at B, but that was before I realized that his special pin prevents them from using any heroes also. So that is often like almost forces them to Freya or Fairy or negate it, which is just a tremendous trade. Is for a card that you can run more than one of in your deck. And then he's got the big old sexy 10. He's got the 6 that can't be blocked by place cards. He has self-preservation, which, you know, the whole retreat to reserve. So he often gets left alone because of that, which is really nice. The only thing holding him back is his grid at 20 points, but the fact that he has all these monster specials, such an awesome kit, and then his best card Nautilus, you know, just like a 90% lockout, you know, situationally, sometimes 100% for anybody on the team. Reaper Stopper, it's just amazing. And then fun fact, if he's with Barsoom, he actually has the biggest stats of anybody in the set, because he goes to 7-6-7-7, which is kind of crazy. Hard to fit that in with all his existing specials, and I've only seen him in like one Barsoom deck, which was Marcel's, which was successful, but it's something.
Yeah. Solid character, no notes. He doesn't have speed, but I mean, he's got a 10. you don't need to throw 2 attacks if a 10 will do it. So
true that.
very, very good character. Which
Carson
brings
of
us up to
Venus.
Carson of
Speaking of gorgeous stats, in Legacy he would be 23 points. He has phenomenal stats. 7.5, 4.47. The fact that he's cheaper up front and a little more in reserve, that's great for the theory crafting gears. I think that I kind of have a knee-jerk reaction if he goes in anything other than Baker Street, because his discard 3 suddenly goes from a hand-winning card to meh, should I even play this? I really like the shell card. And up front, he actually has some interesting stuff. He has the 7 offensive or 5 defensive that stops the turn, and a personal avoid. So if he's up front, he's pretty much getting left alone. And then he has the interesting special, which we don't see a lot of because we don't see a lot of frontline Carson, which is the target character cannot play cards with an energy icon. So that's both offensive and defensive. So somebody, against energy decks, they can't even defend with that's placed to them anymore. And that can also, can gum up multiple cards. So I think that is situational, but can be really, really good. And then, the Stars and Garters, old school beast style, throw this out and this will eat any attack for the team. Takes a turn to pop, but that's just a great card. I've seen eat and negate many times, or, stop an 8 or a 9 or whatever. Very solid. I think he's just put in reserve a lot because not only is playable reserve cards, but he can just be a backup for an energy deck or an intellect deck because of those stats. Or he can be kind of a bridge between, So my favorite deck that I saw him frontline was I'm forgetting the name of him. He's the son of a guy who used to play a lot in the Toronto regional. He had 221s. He had Merlin, Leo, Carson, and then Watson in the back with Baker Street. And I thought that was a really cool deck. But it's double 7s up front. He's getting the passive venture boost. Merlin, Carson, and Watson all have spy cards. Merlin has an amazing one. And then Leo was kind of just the anchor, just get through both these 8s. And the negates and whatever. And he has a 4-make additional too. So he brings a lot. But he's not phenomenal. I put him somewhere between C and B, like I would say top of C tier, because again, he kind of locked to Baker in my brain.
Yeah, I'm going with C as well. I don't see any reason to play him in a deck that's not 221B. And I just don't think that there's enough there to play him up front. So situationally, I think I'm putting him at C.
Yeah, I would agree. I love that energy lockout card. I think against the right deck can be one of the most powerful attacks that you can make against somebody, but he doesn't bring that much else. Other characters have 7s, other characters have 4-making additionals. He's got that interesting pairing with Merlin in that deck you're talking about. That just makes for the ultimate tanking character because no one really wants to go for Carson of Venus. He's got 2 strong defensive cards, but just not enough outside of Baker to warrant much more than that reserve spot, in my opinion.
All right, we got one of my favorite characters here, Count of Monte Cristo. I want him to be more playable. I want him to be good. He's a character that you're not going to build around him, but he's the solid, like, star jammers to the spawn, right? Like, he's your number 2 guy, but there's just no number 1 in this set to pair him with. And so I think that holds him back from being very strong. He's the best raw card advantage character in the set, but there's a reason you don't see him in a lot more top 8s, and I think because it's harder to pair him with being in his 7 as an intellect. I have him at B tier, unfortunately, as much as it kills me, but that's where I think he belongs.
So
go for it, Pierre.
I think I'd put him at A. I think you're absolutely right in identifying that he doesn't have that much in ERB to pair with. 20 points is a lot, especially when you're considering the other combat 20-point characters. And if you're going to go kind of intelligence heavy, there's not a lot else that, other characters are going to support and let you keep count alive, as giving another like threat for them to go after. I think that could change with when we see, other sets come out and he's got other teammates because, I mean, the 6, where if it's successful, they have to discard 2 is incredible. Jacopo lets you put in, I mean, you can throw that 10 multi in your deck when you're playing him because they're just not going to expect that. They might be blocking with a 6 thinking that it's going to be, that 6 intelligence attack. He's got some defense to keep him alive with the brute force and combat block that, can really punish your opponent. So I think he's got all the cards that you want. He just needs support. And we're not seeing that now, but we can see that later. And in future decks, I would love to have Count on my team. So I'd give him an A.
Yeah, you guys both didn't mention his best card, the draw 3. Yeah, that is true. That is raw card advantage. He's 20 points. He has absolute terrible stats, but he makes up for it with his specials. He has self-preservation. It's combat or brute force icon, not attacked like Dracula. So often gets left alone. Good luck spectruming him without running into that card. Like Rob said, he's the star jammer. So to Pierre's point, I agree. And in further sets, he's gonna get way better. Being able to follow with a face down can really gum up what your opponent's trying to do. You can run multiple copies of the 6, discard 2, which more stuff hits in ERB than in Legacy. He is a card advantage machine, and I think in future sets that will push him over the edge. So I think ERB raw, he's a B, but since we're doing vacuum rating, I think we got to put him at A because I think when he has the proper pairings, he's going to be dominant.
Yeah, I think we're gonna look at him more when you have Robot.
Mm-hmm.
Cthulhu wants to Andrew, this is your boy, right? This is
Oh, this is not my boy, but he lives in the right over here.
Seattle waters.
Yeah, I've faced him enough times. Good Lord. Thomas and Joe love this guy. He's got a phenomenal, awesome grid. He is the first 22 pointer we're looking at. He is an anchor. The interesting thing about this anchor is he's also very usable in reserve. He can give you a +1 card, even over running like a Jane or a Billy in the back because he has playable specials and playable teamworks from the back. So if you're doing like a game of chicken, place up, he's always going to be, can be a card ahead of your opponent, which is relevant and interesting. I think Cthulhu's main flaws is that he can't really protect his team. He has the cool sacrifice thing, which most people don't play. He can protect himself with a straight avoid, though. So he's interesting in both slots. He's got an 11, and then his is what I think his best card, -5 hit points to all your guys, is just incredible and can be one or multiple sneaky KOs at the same time. And then he's got the 3, the chain, not quite as good as Jones, but +1. It's fairly rare that you're getting 3 bonus attacks with that. So 3 attacks period is pretty great. He's an offensive powerhouse, can protect himself fairly well with the straight avoid. I mean, most people only play 1, but still sometimes it's enough of a deterrent. You place it hand 1 and he'll just get ignored. And then he has such a nice grid. He fits with a lot of other characters. Now the thing is where he suffers from the brute force problem. Like there's just not that many amazing brute force guys that are or brute force support characters. So he's very limited in this set with what you can play him with, but as we get, 15 pointers like Glenn's popping in, we're going to see more of him in reserve, and as we get just cheaper characters overall, I think he will be able to fit. It's another counter to that witch shifting thing. If everybody has less life, it's harder to shift stuff around. So yeah, I say I could see the argument for A tier, but he's still very expensive, suffers from the brute force problem. I put him at the top of B tier, but I could see A.
So when I was going to nationals, I was trying to look at previous decks to see what I thought I can pull from them that's going to counteract, the shifts meta that we've been seeing in regional 3 and 4. And one of the things that I looked at was Joe Peters' deck from Seattle, where he did Joan of Arc and Cthulhu. And then I ended up making my version of that and brought that to Nationals, because I don't think that there's another character in this set that brings more ominous pressure than Cthulhu. He has, solo chains are great depending on that character's kit, but anything that lets your teammates do attacks can just crank that up to another level. So you get that -5 into play. Now all your venture cards, even your any power teamworks, become something to be feared, as opposed to like, what's the venture count for this battle? Do I want to let this hit? Because, if you have 20 points to keep a character alive, 6 coming your way is usually not that big of a deal. But when it's 15 for your ceiling, that's rough. When he's got an 11 that can almost one-shot you when that's out, that makes you scared to see as an opponent. And then that 3, especially you can do it from the reserve if you're burning a card. Now you have, a sheriff up front that's throwing a 9, or a Leonidas, throwing 8s. Like, you can just bring so much power in one turn. And I don't think there's another character that can do it in quite the same way, and make those cumulative KOs matter. So I put him in A.
Yeah, I have him in B. I think the only thing I'd add is I like that Network of Fanatics is probably going to be your tertiary set with him, because your 8s and brute force and your 7. So you're probably going to build the other characters, their grids around him. So having that energy, like, attack, I think is a good tertiary option for spectrum pressure is important. But yeah, I think he's a solid B. Pierre, you want to start with Deja?
Deja Thoris. I think this one might be more of a spicy one. Or you guys might overrule me here anyway.
F tier.
No, don't put her at F, but I actually think that she's only a C tier. So I love that she's got a draw 3. She's got another 1 per deck that once you put it down, anytime your opponent's betting 2, you're going to be picking up another card from that, which is also very good. She's got a Team Avoid, one of the few in this set that's going to stop your Reapers or stop anything massive. So, you're looking at me and asking, Pierre, why you just listed 3 amazing cards. Why don't you think she's much more than playable? Well, she's 18 points. She's got only a max 6 unless you use one of her Barsoom boost cards to get her to 7s. And that one actually has a smaller boost than most of the other Barsoom ones, because the 6 goes to a 7. So you're not really going to want to even play her in an intelligence deck. So that whole other half doesn't really help you all that much. You're just going from a 6 to a 7, and that's pretty much your card. So there's like a lot of her attacks that force you into certain, certain compositions. If you have her 4 combined card, you're going to be wanting to do that with a character that's got good brute force, but she's weak in brute force. You're going to want to pair her combat energy, but right now, certainly in ERB, we're not seeing much of that. But that you have to have a lot of staying power and reason to keep her around in order to make use of those draw cards of her. So you're almost going to be requiring someone else on your team to be doing a huge defensive lift to keep Deja in play. So I think she's got a lot of vulnerabilities. She's got a lot of, strong cards, but also really strong weaknesses. And because of that, I think that risk puts her in C for me.
I'm interested to hear your take.
My
interest-
I originally had her in S tier, and I think that's wrong. In my first list, way before any tournaments or anything. I do think that's wrong. You brought up some very valid points. I think that the draw card every time they venture more than one mission hasn't been cracked yet, because it's almost impossible to keep her alive, like you said. I think the way she's an excellent support character. I think you kind of, to get the most out of her, you got to use her like the legend Phil Miller, rest in peace. where he had 4 cards playable for her in the entire deck. He had her with Leo and Zoro. He played the draw 3, the 4 brute force make additional, the team avoid, which also does a full stop that literally buys you the initiative back, which is very relevant. And then an energy teamwork, which is offsuit in his deck. So even if she goes down, meh. And in plenty of games, you're going to pop the draw 3, or at least get 1 or 2, maybe even 3 of her cards out, and you're not going to miss her. So I think if you look at it from that lens, I think she's a solid support, but not without her weaknesses for sure. So I say B.
Yeah, I have her in B too. She's hard to keep alive. Her specials are, you know, the avoid and the draw 3, like, really draw you in, and then kind of after that, I don't think there's a whole lot of meat there, so I always had her in B. I think she also doesn't play as well with Witch and Joan, and being a female character, and, there's a reason you don't see her in kind of that Witch Joan shell. So, yeah, I've got her in B. Dr. Watson. Who wants to take Dr.
Oh,
Watson?
I got Dr. Watson.
All right,
I
go
like this
for it.
character a ton. Fun fact, in playtesting, his inherent used to be, your team is +2 to venture total per battle. If using 221B Baker Street, your team is +3 to venture. So he was just the auto play. Just everyone jammed him in reserve with no cards, and then built a monster front line because +2 to venture. But that kind of showed me like how relevant that is. Watson's great because he's so flexible. First off, he's a primary combat grid, and we already know how much support this set gave to combat characters. He's got a secondary intellect 5, which is very relevant, and a ton of characters have that. So he's very nice to slot in. He's also good. He's good in reserve. He's good in the front. He's got, Baker Street synergy, plenty of it. He's got Asclepion synergy with one of the best heal cards in the game, himself or an ally. He's got a 7 multi. He's got a 4 make an additional, so he can kind of dump his stuff. And then he also has the interesting shift to him and take a hit and draw a card, which is, card neutral, but protecting a guy at the same time. Imagine your any hero did that. Like, it's already good. So, we got people like Dave playing 4 copies of that in their deck as just he's a sacrificial lamb to keep, like a Zeus up type of thing. So he has so much versatility and so many like cards that are just interesting, and he's always doing something. So I think, I could see the argument for B tier, but he's also performed very well in tournaments. So I put him at the very bottom of A tier personally.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth between A and B. He's such an incredibly versatile character. You can slot him in almost any deck, which means that floor is really high. He does everything that he needs to. He's got a nice support and rounded options. And so I put him at B, but with the full understanding that that versatility itself is not necessarily a in-game benefit. That's almost when you're deck building. The fact that he's versatile there is phenomenal.
I'm going to see him a lot. Yeah.
You're going to see him a lot. So I'm trying to take that out of my rating from him, because once you set him in a deck, what can he do when he's in that deck? And it's not going to be all 5 of these options. It's going to be you pick the one you want. And all those ones that he's doing are very solid, but they're not exceptional, with the possible exception of that shift and draw. That it just keeps someone important alive and is very good.
That's fair.
Yeah, I've got him in B. I just think to get max value, you have to use Baker Street. I think he's kind of situational. So that's kind of where I landed on him. Dracula, are we going C or D? We just talked about him. I'll take this one. Unfortunately, I think he's a D. It's so hard to use him in this deck, not just because, you need him to be good in a situational meta where there's a lot of teammate focus cards, but having 22 points doesn't generate a lot of venture, slower character. I think he's just kind of a D character, unfortunately.
Yeah, if you know what deck you're going to face, I mean, he could be B or even A, but without knowing that, there's just so many decks he whiffs against. And for so many points, so little venture. Cool thematic inherent, but yeah, I think in the future he'll be better, but I agree with D.
Yeah, I'm putting that nail in the coffin there too.
So his avoid's also trash. It's avoid a combat or brute force attack,
Yep.
not icon. So if anybody knows his cards, which I mean right now they might not, but if anybody knows his cards, you just throw your multis and your any's as the other things and get around his avoid easily.
Yeah, it's he right now he's basically unplayable. When he has the right teammates, there will be decks that will want him and want his skills as a support 22 character. But those are going to be few and far in between. He's just should have been a 21 pointer, I think.
Yeah, too big of an investment to be a 22-point support.
Headless Horseman, I think this is another pretty easy D character. Doesn't generate a whole lot of venture. His unique cards are cool and thematic, but it's not something you'll build around. It's kind of situational. I've got him in D. I'm willing to hear if anyone else thinks differently.
I like him a ton. I've tried him a ton. No defensive card. Really need a defensive wall to get him going and have him do his stuff. As a max 7 and no defensive cards, it's pretty easy to take him out if you're over invested in him. He's great. He's awesome. I love him. Check out the dope art.
That's
But
such
yeah,
a sick art.
put him in D tier.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I actually have kind of opposite thoughts about it, Robert. I think he brings a lot of venture. He's got 3 6s and a 4, and each of them can do some pretty astonishing things. The 6 intelligence can work on its own, but throwing a 6 after a concession, a 4 that discards, place cards and can't be blocked in certain ways, like they're very strong attacks. But you have to build your deck around him.
Mm-hmm.
He barely works if you don't have Mark of the Headless, and he doesn't start with Mark of the Headless. And so you either have to load up on cards on this character that's got no defense in order to try and make his engine run, or half the games he's going to perform really poorly and half of them he's going to perform well. I think if he had gotten a little bit of a treatment, kind of like Mina, where he could throw that discard placed from reserve, I think he would be a lot more playable and there'd be a lot more justification to try and put him in a deck. He's also going to be too slow to really make that work. So D.
He also has a really silly interaction where if you play the draw a card and then summon Mark of the Headless and play it immediately, if that one card you draw is Mark, you don't get to play it. And that's happened to me more than once.
Yeah.
Like table flipping and raging.
Rough. All right. Hercules.
Okay. Yeah.
Whew. All right, Hercules. He is awesome, very cool, very strong. Back up 6 combat's nice to go with the 8 brute force. He's a strong, fair character. Like I've heard, Dave and some people say he's the modern Spawn. Totally disagree. His coolest card is the 7 or less that can protect the team, but can also attack. Yeah, it's very nice and flexible, but you still can only have 1 a turn at most. He's got a 9. His 4 is interesting. His offsuit 4 that doesn't allow follow-ups if it hits. That's cool, but it's not that hard to block a 4 usually. Personal avoid, and then slaying the Hydra is interesting, and another card that can get rid of these EFL or harness type things. But at best, it's a 1-for-1, and often it's a useless or a whiff. So yeah, I mean he's in theory and on paper he's a great anchor. I don't think he's bad, but I don't think he's great, so I'd stick him in B.
When I initially went through ERB, to me, he was immediately the the best character in the set when you kind of like defense, generates venture, and then you play with him and you don't have anyone to put around him. And yeah, I think it becomes pretty quick that he's kind of a B character. I mean, he'll be someone to evaluate going forward. I mean, I think the problem we'll find with um, Skybound is that all the other 8 brute force characters are just as expensive as he is. So, that's going to be tough. I mean, maybe you can put him with a character like Invincible. That's kind of a second option, and so that may be worth exploring. But yeah, I think he's also a B.
When I first looked at him, everyone was saying the same thing, that he was going to be the character that everyone was playing and that he was so good. And I've tried playing him and I've just never really understood it. The 7 is so nice and it's more versatile than, let's say, King Arthur's, 6 or less Team Avoid or anything else like that. But there's other much cheaper brute force characters that bring almost the same venture. The fact that he's got no speed is just such a rough proposition for him, because cool, he's got a 9. Cool, he's got a 6. He's got that 7. Sheriff's an 18-pointer with a 9 and a 6. And those things do better things than
better
9
6.
and 6. And so, do I really want to spend 4 points for a team defense card and an 8? I mean, my answer is no. I think he's good. Makes you want to say he's playable, but no, he's definitely good enough to be good, but not the S tier anchor that people were hoping.
Invisible Man's interesting, but I think there's a reason he's getting a promo at 16 points. His grid leaves a lot to be desired. It's very hard to keep him alive unless you draw that piece of personal defense early. He's doing nothing to keep your team alive. Kind of have to run him with Baker Street, otherwise you lose the biggest. I'm in your house. The one per deck, open your hand, which would just catch people with their pants down occasionally. But when you're limited to one home base and there's still better options, like Watson's often just a better character to put in that slot. He has some interesting stuff, the 0 and the 5 that are really hard to block. I think as a power pack character, once he's 16, we might see him a little bit in reserve with just that power card fetch, because it is an exchange. So you trade it, you play your 8, you play that, and then you go get another 8. But as soon as he goes down, that's then moot and you're down a card. So I don't know. There's so many people who have tried to make him work who are great deck builders and great players, and he's still yet to do anything. So I think he goes in D.
Yeah, easy D. We'll see what happens when he's a 16-point character, but until then, I don't see any reason to think of him as anything else.
I'll put him in D because you guys outrule me. I would have put him in C. He brings a very unique kit that no one else has in ERB, right? It's very thematic. His strikes can only really be blocked by 5 power cards and above, which he kind of fills that assassin role, but he's also really slow at it and kind of is pulled in a couple different ways. But they can be really strong, and especially if you pair him with a character that gives him speed, that can be extreme KO pressure for pretty cheap. And if you have him later on in the game too, and you are able to get his discarded intelligence card to discard any attack on him, that can be very, very powerful. So if you can keep him alive late, or let's say even put him in the reserve so that he comes up with that card, he's going to pretty much be a lockout option where no one can really touch him. So in the future, as we're moving into Skybound, and the battleground for Skybound is going to have a lot more defense, and so I think people are going to be relying on that defense more, all of Invisible Man's attacks are going to get through at 100%. You can shift things off, but if you're not defending with a 5 or higher power card, those are 2 colors that can potentially go on you. So I think he's got a role. I don't think we're seeing it yet, but I don't think, especially at 16 points in the future, I don't think that he's going to be a character that you're just going to ignore. And we'll see how that plays out.
The face down attacks is also interesting too. Make them mill too.
and you get a power card while playing it. So he
Yeah.
definitely can pull up a lot, as if you're playing with robot and you're giving him speed, playing your attack. So I think there's ways, but at 16 points, there's a much higher chance that he's going to be out
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
Jane Porter. I think
Yeah.
easy A, Jane. Like she's solid, great in reserve. The two you can chuck post concessions, nasty, especially in a non-intellect deck. Wonderful up front. The avoid an attack discard is incentive to leave her alone, which is her biggest weakness with that crappy grid and being a max 6. One of the best cards in the set, Ethno-Archaeologist, which just wipes all the remainder of battle and game, placed and in play. So that'll heal Thunderbolts. That will get rid of all the EFL, harness, crap, shield phalanx, transformation trickery, whatever. All that's gone, even if it's placed and not in play. And then she has some nice mill stuff too. I've seen a couple of decks with like her and Poseidon together. You kind of really want to block her attacks when she's up front because you're going to be milling good stuff out of your deck if you allow it to hit. So great support character. I think she's the intellect Billy.
So
Yeah,
I
I agree.
go ahead, Robert. So I was looking at her, and I think in the current meta, I mean, we saw in the Nationals deck, she was a part of 4 or 5 of them, right? Because she's got an answer to the strongest stuff that's currently on the board, right? EFL and Harness the Wind. So I think that right now, that kit gives her a lot of viability. But I want to comparing her to someone like Hyde, like they have similar venture output. There's a similar disincentive to attack them. If you're looking at what's the actual difference between these characters, and that's pretty much just ethno-archaeologist. And that helps out. Realistically, that helps out now. It's probably going to help out a lot in the future. But that's the one card that puts her over the top in my mind. So I think she has a good kit. But I don't think it's very strong just because of that. So that's where I would place her as B, but still a very solid character that I would want, and you can fit into a lot of different decks.
Yeah, I have her as a B as well. I think she's good. She's a good 16. I think Archimedes Q Porter is good. Like going through and nuking 3 of their specials, if successful, is a pretty big deal. I mean, Ethno-Archaeologist is pretty good, hits all cards in play. Yeah, I like that most people aren't going to attack her because of not a damsel in distress. Like 2 for 1ing yourself is and they always seem to have it when you go after her. So, she's gonna live. When you see Silver Sable or little Spider Woman come up in Legacy, they just get beat to death almost instantly because they can't defend themselves. She actually can. I've got her at B, but I see the argument for A. But yeah, let's take a break here and then we'll pick this up. Hey everyone, after a short break, we are back and we are up with the next character, the first S tier character, Joan of Arc. I mean, she does it all. You can play control with angelic visions. You have one of the best chain attack cards. You have probably the best card in the set with early feminist leader. She kind of, whatever you were trying to do, Joan does it. So I couldn't put her in any tier other than S tier.
No arguments here.
No question about that one. I think the only question is how many points would she have to be for you not to want to play her? I mean, even at 19, she'd be in every deck. I can honestly see her being played at 20 as well. She's just incredible.
Yeah, 20 was probably a more appropriate value given kind of what we know now. But the fact that she gives you a point is pretty big. John Carter. Where do you guys think he fits?
Go for it, Goof.
Man, I have wanted to make a whole lot of decks with John Carter, and I've gone through the whole roller coaster. At first, when I pulled him out, I loathed his card. I'm not a big fan of the art. I'm looking at the mechanics. I'm not seeing any speed. I'm not seeing stuff matching up. I pretty much wrote him off early on, and then as the season keeps going, I kept creeping up into it. He's got a lot of 8s. He's got a lot of ways to defend himself. He's got a lot of ways to defend his teammates. He's one of the very few 19-point characters. He's even got that Barsoom bump, if you want to include that in one of your decks. So it makes him pretty fun to play in a lot of different formats. But ultimately, I mean, he's got that nice 5 intelligence, 7.5 brute force is pretty good, but there's not a lot of brute force combat pairings for this set. And I think as we go on into future sets, he gives a lot of variable scenarios where he can fit into a good deck. So that's going to make him pretty versatile. But, he's probably going to not be paired with his buddy Tars, who's going to be coming down the list. So I've thought about it. I think he's pretty solid, but I can't really give him much more than a B.
Yeah, I really like his kit. I mean, his inherent is like kind of meh. Like, I think if you sucked him into a Barsoom type of build, then he kind of has too many specials, and you have to run a really greedy build for him. But it is cool, and I've seen some cool, combo decks that can do some stuff, like him with Merlin and stuff, where you make them all 8 brute forces, and you're fetching power cards, and it's like some cool weird stuff you can do. But yeah, the coolest thing about him, in my opinion, is that you don't know what he's gonna have when you're against him, right? Like they could have 4 8s. They could have 3 of the any power and then the spectrum one. He could have 1 or 2 lockouts. I've seen people play 2, and it's really good. Brute force or combat icon. So that's stopping all colored teamworks. A lot of attacks. We know combat's super popular. There's a lot of big combat attacks in this set, even from non-combat characters. The full heal is cool, and the downside of it being that it still counts to venture is like kind of mitigated by the fact that he's bringing a lot of venture. And then he's just got a raw teammate of Void. So it's like, do you target him? Do you leave him alone? I mean, I think it rewards good creative deck building, and he can be played so many different ways, kind of like a Joan. I mean, she has some auto-include cards, but you could play 3 teammate avoids and no lockouts for him, or you could play, 2 lockouts in the heal and no teammate avoids. Like, you could catch your opponent off guard with certain ways to build him. I just think you got to stay away from being greedy and playing like 8 or 9 specials for him, which some decks kind of you would want to do at first glance. My first thought was C, playable, but I think when there's more brute force help, and I'm playing him in a deck recently too, and he's kind of surprised me. I think he's right solid at B.
Yeah, to me, B feels appropriate. I mean, the floor is kind of only so bad on him, right? He's got a 6, he's got a 7, he's only 19 points. He has 2 attacks that are, 8, so he's throwing good venture. I mean, he's good at protecting other characters because they're either going to go after him to try and go around the team of Void, or he's got teammate Void. So, yeah, he feels to me like a character that once Skybound drops and there's more help in the brute force suit, that he only gets better. So I think he's a character you kind of need to keep coming back and evaluating and questioning, like, is this the pair? Kind of the same thing with like Hercules. So yeah, I'm with you all in B.
King Arthur, he's got quite a unique and interesting kit. He also has the worst card in the set, which was getting some talk on the Discord today. And it's got the cool name too, Knights of the Round Table. You guys even know what that one does?
I was part of that discussion, so yes, unfortunately.
Yeah, a 2-for-1 to reduce your opponent's ventured missions by 1. 2 cards for 0, but to reduce their ventured mission by 1. Terrible, but he's got the team avoid 4 or less, which is very nice in this new modern format because that stops teamworks as well as allies. It's a 6 or less if he's paired with Merlin or Lancelot, which, is sometimes relevant. He's got 2 big attacks, the 7 and the 9 half multi. The 9 is just a 9, but that's plenty awesome. The 7 is great because it wipes all cards in play with a remainder of battle or remainder of game. So that can, if timed appropriately, can clear like a Harness or an EFL. It also can, I've seen tricky builds where he's actually in an Asclepion and it can heal, certain hits like Thunderbolts and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. He's got a raw teammate of Void also, so he's really drawing aggro to himself. Cool inherent, +1 to venture every battle. Nice stats. He's got a 7 and then a backup 6. Yeah, I think he's really solid. And then heavy as the head. So, I mean, that card kind of begs you to play him with like a Mina or a Leonidas or something where he can get, like a negate or an 8 to defend himself or attack with. So he does have to be paired with certain characters. He's better with certain characters. So that's like slightly limiting, but we've also seen great success. Like Marcel punched him into a legacy deck and he did good there too. So, I think that he's the top end of B tier. I can even see an argument for A, but I'll put him at the bottom of A or the top of B. I mean, I'm really happy with either one.
Nice.
Go
Not
ahead,
easy to
Goof.
crack into that A tier. So I was thinking about that too, and I slotted him in at B eventually. He's a little bit like Witch in that he's got a couple very chunky attacks, and then he's got some really like clutch cards. Obviously, you're going to be probably running more than just 4 cards with him than you would with Witch in a general build. But he's very solid. He's going to be drawing aggro. And unlike John Carter, his 4 or less or 6 or less avoid can, block just about any color that's out there. So I think he has a little bit more survivability because John Carter, you can play around a little bit more. Very solid. And I think, honestly, that combat intelligence, as we get more beefier intelligence characters, I think we're going to see more of King Arthur because that team defense is not something that we deal with too much right now in ERB, but I think that's going to become, the premium as things become a little bit more tanky in the future. So I'd say B.
Yeah, he's tough. Like you can see the argument for A, you can see the argument for B. I mean, he's one of the better defensive characters in the set, in a set where defense is premium. So that's tough. I'm gonna call him B tier. One of the problems I've had with him is heavy as the head tends to read better than it plays. Sometimes it's kind of limiting depending on who you play with him. And there have been times where I'm sitting there looking at this card and I just think, I wish this was anything else. This is a card that's better in the legacy environment because there are so many good non-1 per decks to grab there for so many different characters. I think Arthur's a character that gets better as the characters around him get better, but in a vacuum, I think he's a B tier, unfortunately.
Going up on a defensive streak here with Korak being next. This is an interesting character. He's one of the very few 17 pointers in this set. I feel like 17, 21 points were just almost non-existent here. So there's not a lot of competition in that block, but he's got that great 1 per deck, Jackie and Miriam Clayton, which is really his signature card because it shifts all attacks for remainder of game onto Korak, and they all land at -2, which is a cool mechanic because he's got a 6 or less avoid. So once you have that up, you can defend 8s just by himself. So it's a complete and utter game changer. But because of that, a lot of times people try and pull him down early, as early as they can to avoid seeing that. Unless, of course, they've got a negate character, and then they can kind of just get around his whole kit, and he doesn't really have that much of an effect. He's got a sneak, I think it's an energy attack that can only be defended by combat cards. But he's got a 6 and he's got a combine. So he's got a little bit of offense, but it's all kind of slow. It's all really geared around like a handful of big 1 per deck defensive cards. And so that makes him kind of situational. Not every single deck is going to want to run his kit, and not most decks are really going to want to have that sort of attack defensive power because there's just so many gaps on it. So I put him at C. I think he's certainly not a D tier character, and you can argue for bumping him up to B just because he's 17 points. Strike me as a character that I'm itching to put into different decks.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I mean, his stats are interesting. I'd rather have a 7 on him than the dual 6. Dual 6 is nice for like offsuit teamworks and whatever, but everything is dependent on you getting Miriam and Jackie Clayton into play. And on top of that, to have his 6 or less avoid hit the whole team, you have to pair him with either Tarzan or Jane, which does limit deck building because that's half your team right there. It does afford you a lot of points, but I mean, you could do like those, him and Jane and then Leo and Wukong. Like, you have a lot of points left over, but still, you're kind of jammed into a specific. That's half your team. So yeah, I agree. He's straight up C. He's slow. He's got some tricks, but you need it. You need it to hit the certain, the right time. He can just get blown out before it gets there, like Goof said. He's not terrible, but he's not great either.
Yeah, no argument for me here on C. I think the limitation of him being at his best, needing Tarzan or Jane Porter, is a pretty big restriction. When I've tried him, like I tried him with Zeus, tried him with Tarzan and a few other characters, it's just kind of like on that line, like, okay, maybe I want him, but do Tarzan or Jane fit the plan with the rest? And I think that's kind of the problem. I think C is the right place for him. Lancelot, I'll start with him. Okay. I think he's a D. Just every time I've played him, I felt like he's underwhelming. If he were an 8 combat, that might have made him a little more playable, but I think he's a cool concept. And he was a character that got a nerf from testing as well, I believe. Yeah, I'd put him solidly at D.
Unfortunately, I tried to bring him to Philly. It is a very, very cool inherent, the fact that he gets a card, which we're going to see in this coming up next set too, that just starts and it doesn't take up a slot. So you're kind of half a card ahead from the beginning. It sounds so cool, but just the rest of his specials just don't make up for it. You have to spend so many cards to make him be the tank where he's removing hits and avoiding and stuff. And he has no speed. He has no venture. I really, really wish that, like Joe had said before, that they made Lancelot 19 and gave him an 8 combat, and then made Leo 20 and gave him a 7 combat. We would have so many more fun interactions and swaps, but just the way that it, landed, Leo's just great, as we're going to talk about in a second, and Lancelot falls short. I do like that you can pop Sword and Shield with, just a 7, so he can just throw 9s at any time, at least for one turn. That's pretty cool. It has the personal avoid, and he's got the 7, which can be a 10. And the 5 half multi is all right, but that's it. I mean, you're kind of like, to get good value out of him, you really have to have a team built around it. You kind of are almost forced to use Asclepion so that you're getting value out of the heals and can make up that card advantage. Right now, yeah, I mean, maybe someday there's something that can make him better, but he's not even that great with Arthur, aside from a great matchup. So yeah, stick him in D.
Yeah, definitely agree with you guys on that. I think Lancelot is a very cool concept, and his major flaw is that no one wants to attack him, and all of his cards are based around people attacking him. So he's got the 1, which if you can play it up against a teamwork and you can get 3 attacks against him, that's great. But then all the other rounds are You're going to go right back to it, and no one's going to target him. And that means that none of his cards are really getting played to their full effect. So the only thing that I've seen that has made him, even worth putting on a team, really, is I've seen a couple people putting him in reserve, and with one card in the deck, was plus Venture and Regain Sword and Shield, you get a pretty solid power pack answer to where you can throw 9s, all your stuff is going at +2, and you got an avoid, which works well if you're like the last character left. So that is kind of in his favor. And if we ever see some characters that have the old Dr. Octopus and Dr. Doom shift aways, I think he can get a little bit of value there. But, it's D tier because he needs, other people to even make himself worthwhile.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Leonidas, though, is a whole different story. Like you alluded to earlier, I mean, he's an 8 brute or 8 combat right now, and people would be playing him even if he had 7 combat because Leo is just fantastic. I think he's one of the most played characters over this entire season because he's got, that 8 stat. He's got an 8 combat special, non-1 per deck that can be used not only for offense, but also to defend himself. He's got a really tricky 6 brute force that if it lands, it locks out their special card usage for that character for the rest of the round. And if they do defend it, it just shuffles back in. So it's just a perennial attack that you'll just keep having to deal with until you have to bite the bullet one round. And of course, he's got, one of the most clutch cards in the set of a team avoid, 1 per deck. So you can stop the Reaper, you can stop one of your opponent's big hits. So he's got a lot of answers, and really the only thing that he's missing is speed. But there's a lot of other fast combat characters out there, so you're not really that hurting for it because he's going to be bringing a ton of venture for you. So, I mean, I think Leonidas is fantastic. He's got Shield Phalanx where you can use your power cards, get +1 to defend for the entire team. Situational whereas when you want that, but it's not a bad card. And the other one, teammate or himself gets to make a combat attack or defense at +3, which as the card pool opens up, I can really see some clutch stuff happening with that where, you have the very strong 5 or 6 that people can block very easily. Now it's at a +3 and it can sail over someone's head and they have to spend a premier defense. So not going to be a card that's going to be changing too many games, but he's got a little bit of utility on his kit. So I think extremely well-rounded character. He's won tournaments. He was really prevalent in a lot of top 8s, and I think he's an S tier character.
I agree with 90% of what you said. I've been using him a lot lately, and I do think he's great. I very much like him with the lean and mean build, where you just play 5 cards for him, 3 300s, the 6, and the team avoid. He also has some nice, flexibility in Spartan, letting you reshuffle those trainings and then draw a card for each one. So they're not, they're all of a sudden a card and a half each instead of half a card. I do think that's really cool. I think Shield Phalanx looks great on paper, but every time I've seen it, I am happy when my opponent draws it because they're just down a card is often how it goes. I just commentated on a match today, which will come out soon. Dead card. I feel like more often than not, that's what it ends up being. In theory, it's way cool, but it's also paperclip to him. The 6 also, I think, not only can it be negated away, but it also can be a detriment. I've seen the 6 where I throw it and then it gets shuffled back into my deck and then Leo gets KO'd shortly afterwards. And now all of a sudden I have a dead draw and I didn't actually want to shuffle it back. That is the exception, but it does happen. I really like that he, can defend himself with that 8 special. And so you could even have a different 8 ranker be the anchor of your team that has the 8 power card, and then you have really nice defense on both of them. I do think he's really solid, but I also think he is missing speed. He can't do some of the broken stuff that the S tier characters in my brain can do. So hot take, I have him at the top of A tier, but I see the merit for us.
Yeah, I have him at A tier as well. He feels one-dimensional. Like you said, he attacks and blocks, so he defends himself well, but there's nothing kind of like when you think about the other S tier characters, like Joan has some kind of game-breaking thing. Wicked Witch, spoiler alert, has some has
I'm
some
sure
kind of
everyone's
game-breaking
shocked.
thing. Yeah, you're gonna be shocked at that one. Leonidas just doesn't have that. I mean, but he's so good at being that other character with them. I mean, unfortunately, he doesn't really work with Joan or Wicked Witch, but he does work with another character that's really good. So I won't spoil that one. I've got him at A, but it's a tough call putting him there.
I got him in a deck with Witch. I think they work together beautifully. Those two, and then King Arthur. I went 8-0 in the leagues last month with that team.
Yeah, it makes your grid awful.
For sure.
That's kind of the problem with pairing the two of them together.
I mean, I think he works fairly well with Joan as well because he's missing speed and Joan gives him speed. So now you get to chuck an extra 8 every round too. So
It's true.
he's the number one sidekick. He really is.
Yeah. And he's 21, which is huge. And if he's 22, it would be a different story. 21's really nice for what he brings.
I feel like that's appropriate though. Like 21 feels right.
Yep. All right, Master Merlin. Speaking of 21s, this guy, pretty terrible grid for 21 points. He's got no 8s and he's got 2 2s. But he does have an awesome inherent, which a lot of people forget about, and lets you scry at the top card of your deck every round that you remember, and you can put it back or put it to the bottom. So I think the best way to utilize this is to put your teamworks at the bottom because those have great value in the power pack. So at least 1 or 2. And then he also has the 1 per deck negate. 1 per deck negate, which is really, really nice. No cost, no anything. And then he's got a 4/2 multi, make an additional, but that's about it when it comes to offense. He has a lot of utility and tricks. He's got the card that'll let him play an allies cards for the rest of the game, which is interesting, but it's kind of begs him to be put in some sort of combo deck. And then he has the Viking Pyre or Funeral Pyre, whatever, Thor card where you can mill your own deck. So you can set up like a God Hand. Again, a combo thing, way cool, but it's not going to go into every deck, certainly. For the Spy one, that's his other good card, which, again, he's kind of like some characters we've talked about, like Carson, he's like begged to be used in Baker Street because that's a bomb card in Baker Street only, not playable without it. So I think he's very limited. I think if we see like some cheap 8s come out, he is like a good expensive support character that can do some off the wall stuff. But I think that it really requires a very creative deck builder who knows what they're doing. Kind of some tricks and for things to line up. He just doesn't bring any venture or power. He can't even defend himself from 8s unless they're specials with that negate. Yeah, I think that he's C because he's 21. I think if he was 20, he'd be a B. But at 21 points for what you're getting, if you're an excellent deck builder and player, there's some stuff you can do with him, but he's just so limited and off the wall.
Yeah, I go with him as a C character as well. I mean, he's kind of your third option on your team because he's not the biggest defensive character, other than the negates. So he's not really bringing a lot of offense. So kind of like, what is he doing? I mean, you're putting him in your deck because you want the negates, and that's kind of your defense, and that's what you're doing with him. I feel like he's a character that, if there is a combo that comes out, he'd be a character you'd look at and reevaluate. But, kind of as it stands, I have him as C. I mean, 'cause he's just not a character you're building around, and he's so expensive as a support character. Like, I get why they put him so high, just because the non-one per deck negate. But yeah, I think unfortunately he's a C.
This one was a little bit harder for me to judge, just because I wasn't sure if I was off base or not. I don't really have any legacy experience, and negates are, the staple of every single legacy deck. They're probably the first thing that you're thinking of, or maybe second thing that you're thinking of to slot in. And so I know that there's a very big pressure, and negates are phenomenal cards. They're extremely important in so many builds. They can get rid of your Harness the Wind and EFL and big attacks. And they've also got no use against any power cards or teamworks or trainings or anything like that. So they're somewhat one dimensional, but fewer dimensions than some people talk of. So I was debating, like, am I just blinded and these negates are so good that he's worth being like a B tier? Or do I go with my gut? And I honestly would give him a D, because there's so little that I think that he's bringing to the table. There's so little reason why I would want him on my team. And realistically, that one reason comes down to I'm playing Baker Street. If I'm playing Baker Street, that inherent that I'm looking at is going to help me out a little bit. Do I need more venture next round? Do I think what's my card placement situation? So that's going to help. And then his spy is fantastic, because you can't even avoid it. You have to negate it if you want to get around it. But otherwise, his 4 make an additional. You're going to just throw power cards. That's literally the only thing that he's got, or in any character, I suppose. But like, there's very little fuel, so that speed is kind of an illusion. The negates are great, but I'd honestly really rather have Mina for her negates. They essentially become 1 per deck negates with the kind of her reveal downside, so it's really not that different, but it's 3 character building threat points different. And so, like, I think his transmog can really come and give you some really cool potential synergies, but it's a 1 per deck, so that's almost like I would like this to happen, but you can't really build a deck around it to happen. So it just feels like everything that he's bringing to the table, I'll just do it with another character, not sink 21 points, not have a garbage grid, and probably be better off. So I said D, but we'll go with 2 C's here and land him over at C.
Mina is one of my favorites. I initially rated her at S tier. She just has so much cool stuff. We've seen people like Jessica and Felipe pilot her to great success. I've even seen them do a brute force teamwork for her in addition to her pile of specials. I do think she has some glaring weaknesses. The 5 is nice that she can defend herself with, so she's really okay at defending herself against strings. And that negate is really nice. You can, open your hand to play it defensively, which is a pretty costly thing, but there are some situations where it's worth it, or it's not the end of the world. You're down to 1 card in hand anyways, or you have bombs, like you have a fairy and a Freya in your hand or whatever, and it's not really, they can't really punish you for knowing all your cards. And then there's times where you can just wait and then do the offensive portion. You take a big special hit and then you just negate it off and spend your turn instead. So cheapest non-1 per deck true negate, with a downside. So you could run, 2, 3, even 4 if you're Dave, copies of that in your deck. But she has so many awesome specials. There's the 5 that can't be blocked by a special. There's the 5 that can be used for attack or defense, acts as a power card, so it could follow a teamwork or be used with a training. That nasty 7, which can heal something. Offsuit 7, which can heal a hit, permanent record, or current battle. And then discard a placed card, which is also playable from reserve. And she also has a Baker card. Reveal all cards, playable from 1 character, also playable from reserve. So I'm surprised we don't see her more in reserve and Baker deck, because she can, rip apart cards in hand and placed simultaneously. But I think her glaring weakness is that she can't stop big attacks. Anything over a 6, she can potentially negate, but that's it. So I think that the strategy when you're facing Mina is just gun her down as quickly as possible, because to get good value out of her stuff, you have to run a lot of her cards. And those cards are good, but they're dead cards if she's dead. So I think if she had a 7 stat, I think she would be, S tier. She's nice that she refunds you a point. She's a great support character that can slot into energy or brute force decks, but you do have a tough time keeping her alive. So I still think there's a lot of upside and there's a lot of cool stuff you can do. I put her at the bottom of A tier, but I see the merit for people who might think she's B. But I think she just barely cracks A tier.
Uh, I yeah, it's tough. I mean, if she had the 7, she's an easy A or maybe even pushing an S. I'm gonna put her in A. She kinda does a lot of different things. But it's just harder for her to defend herself. I could see you trying to mitigate that using Dracula's Armory, but
Mhm.
coming up with those 3 points is pretty tough. Several of her cards are offsuit. Her 7 and 5 being offsuit is pretty good for the spectrum pressure.
Oh, yeah. She brings a lot of heat. I mean, she's got 3 different colors worth of attacks, which is pretty great. She's got that place defend or place discard card as well that can serve as sort of that offensive defense. If you know that there's a 7 or 8 place, you can get rid of it. So that helps. And she's cheap enough that, putting her with Hercules or something like that can give her some more survivability. But she's versatile. She's got surprising amount of power, works in Asclepion, works in Baker, works with 2 different colors. Honestly, you can throw her on a Joan team because she's got, a 9 and a 7 in that case. So I think she's A. She's great.
Morgan Le Fay, the more I see her, the more I play her, the more I like her. And that's I think she's an A tier character. So like one of the things I think kind of doesn't get enough is Shapeshifter's Guise being able to play KO characters' attacks and basically, preventing you from being down a card is pretty big. I mean, she's versatile in terms of being able to play her in reserve or not. Um, yeah, I think she was a character I initially was like, yeah, but the more I see her, the more I use her, the more I'm surprised by her. So I have her in A. She also has good one per decks, negate. Yeah, the 7. Um, Also being at 19 on the front line is pretty big. So yeah, A tier for me.
I I had her initially down as B, but I think this is, Andrew, you had her in an amazing deck. Other people have done it too. There's so much flexibility that you gain, and she's got a Asclepion pairing. She's got the only reserve negate in the entire game, I believe. So she's just got a great set of utility cards that's pretty much unmatched. And the only thing that she doesn't bring is Venture from her own cards. But because you can load your reserve up with an extra card or 2, you can kind of pseudo get that back, even though she doesn't have that in her kit directly. So she's fantastic. I think, the more and more that I think and play with her, the more that I think she fits into A. There's just so much that she does.
Yep, totally agree with you guys. A 7, secondary 5, nice and cheap on the front line. A little spendy in the back, but you're getting a full heal and a negate for it. So very versatile. The only card I don't like, which I hope we see some action in the future, is the teleportation circle, the swap, because it's so cool. If you could play it defensively, like take the hit and then swap, that would be so cool, and that would push her over the edge maybe as a. You could do some weird, funky combos with that. But Yeah, like Goof said, her only negative is no venture, but she can bring that venture by playing someone else's a dead card or a reserve card. And yeah, I think that's incredible. It gives your opponent targeting issues too, because they either have to go for her, and you can run her lean and mean, like 4 specials, or they ignore her, and then she's utilizing the other character's KO'd cards. So fantastic. And you never know when that full heal's going to come up and just completely ruin all the work they've done chipping away at a character. The negate's awesome. The 4's even good, and it can proc Baker Street. It's on suit, but that's even a thing. So, yep, very solid A tier, very flexible.
Mhm.
Mr. Hyde. I love me some Mr. Hyde. Mr. Hyde is so freaking cool, and an overpower he kind of sucks. He, he has a 4 half multi, which is an 8 against characters of threat 17 or lower, which I think in this set there's only 7 of. So that may open up later, and he can punch the reserve with it too. So I don't know if we ever see a reserve character that can defend the front line that's not expensive like Victory is, and they're meta, like we might see him creep up into play because he can just punch out the reserve with a lot of his cards, which is cool and thematic. He also has the very interesting can't attack or defend with any heroes. So like once that's in play, you can, chuck Teamworks or his 6s or whatever, and they can't be Freya, they can't be Heimdall, they can't be ferried, which is, interesting thing I've seen catch some people sometimes. But he mostly just has a pile of 6s and then a self-lockout. So maybe there's potential in the future with lockout, but he's doing nothing for your team aside from, like he's got the dual 6s, which is interesting, the strength and intellect, but I mean, like, meh. He could serve as a cheap bridge for those two, I guess, and so you can follow up a teamwork and play most of your power cards or something. But he just does not bring enough. There's no speed. He can only protect himself, and he's nice and slow. So his redeeming factor is he's really cheap. But even his full heal only heals permanent record. It doesn't heal current battle when he does the serum and buffs up, and then he only goes to a 7. If that made him an 8 brute force, I think that would be interesting, and we might see more of him. But although I love him, and I love my UR foil of him, one of my favoriteest characters ever, gotta be impartial and stick him right in D tier.
I have it written down the list here that I had him as D, but I swapped him out, put him up at C at the end. Not too much higher. This one is, I think it's going to be interesting to see how Mr. Hyde fares in the future, because his most interesting interaction is set loose, where, your opponent can't defend using any characters anymore, and can't attack him with any characters, but that really doesn't come up very much unless you get to proc it as a cool defensive card, if that's even got a shield on it. But that disorient opponent is probably going to be seen fewer and fewer times in the future, and people aren't going to be trading too many premium battleground defensive cards on some of the follow-ups that are going to get thrown from him. So it's like I think we might see more of him as a cheap 16-pointer who does carry a lot of venture when we have a lot more brute force that people are going to want to play, but he would benefit from like a Joan of Arc type of build where someone else is giving him speed and now he just gets to chuck that venture. But, you're having one entire part of your team that just doesn't interact with your other characters. And that's kind of a hard thing to fit into a team. You're constantly going to be thinking, well, can I just put Korak in instead? At least he's got the shift if I make this work. He's got about the same venture too. And like, you're always going to be looking for other options. I think there's going to be decks that want him. I think he is versatile in that he can be reserve and just be a part of a lockout end game solution. I think he's got abilities to pump out the reserve like you guys said, but I see.
Yeah, I'm going D. I think he's too situational, and that if you want to take out the reserve character for some reason, it comes to a point where there's a strong character in reserve. Um, maybe someone like Cecil, for example, that you want to go after. He becomes
Robot.
better. He fills in right now that role in ERB isn't something that's needed. Um, yeah, he has some venture cards, but I don't think there's a lot there. I mean, in terms of a raw numerical value, it's a lot of sixes. So yeah, I have him as D. I've tried to play him a couple times, usually to make up points for someone else, like Hercules or Dracula. I have him on his D, unfortunately, just from playing him and being a little underwhelmed. Um, Poseidon, I have him as D also, just he's kinda situational. I mean, if you're looking to do a mill style deck, the double sevens are good, but kinda once you get beyond that, and I feel like he should have been an 18 instead of a 19. Um, yeah, I mean, he brings a 7, but do you really care about characters losing their inherent? Yeah, I have him as a D tier, but I feel like there will be someone out there that is coming after me for calling Poseidon weak. What do you guys think?
Uh, I have him at C actually because I've seen him a lot. I've seen him in some really strong online decks. He is situational. We also had a couple local guys that played him too, and I've heard a theory. I've never seen anybody build it, but I've heard a theory where you park him in reserve and then you just bring up the mill 7 to wreck the power pack at the end of the game, which I would like to actually see in practice. Maybe I'll have to build that one myself. But the stats are nice. Uh, I think there's nothing there to do an all-out mill strategy now, but I think as like a secondary thing, like his sixes are kind of must blocks because they mill 3 if they hit. And then, the seven's okay. You kind of have to leave him alone because of his remove an attack from the game lockout. So like you can delete an 8 with that, which I've seen happen. So you could get a little bit greedier with, he has an offsuit 4 make an additional. You can get a little bit greedier with his pile of specials because he's pretty much going to get left alone. I certainly don't think he's good, but I think he's better than the bottom of the barrel. I stick him in C.
I agree with you, Andrew. And I've actually had a deck where I've had him in reserve, and I milled them down to a perfect hand. So that did not work out in my favor.
That can happen.
That can happen. I think he's merits at least a C. He brings a lot of power. I mean, he's got a 7, 7, and 5, which are some really nice cards to have, and lets you put him in a couple different decks. He's got a 4 make an additional you put that into a 6, put that into a 7. He's 2/3 of the way through a spectrum just on his own, and pretty close to a cumulative as well with his kit. So he's I think often left alone, especially if you don't have any other mill elements. You can punish them by going a little bit greedy into his cards. So I've done a couple games where I've actually loaded up 3 6s, and they've just ignored Poseidon because they don't want to be hit with his avoid, and I can just pump out that venture onto them, and those become those must block cards. So he definitely has a facet, and I'm wondering if as we see more advanced universes, whether or not his universe lockup card will end up being useful as well. It's kind of a mini version of Dracula's there, but I mean, I've been impressed by his staying power and the venture that he brings and the decks that he's been able to fit into, which I think puts him into a C for me. But Professor is one that I've never really played with. I've got to be honest with you. I feel like his kit, I mean, it's an 8 intelligence kit. It requires a lot of finesse and a lot of kind of tricky mechanics to be able to use it to its full capacity. Right off the bat, he's got a -10 to venture, 1 per deck. That's great in so many situations, right? You know, 1 card, negate only, +10 or, you know, -10 for your opponent. He's got a couple like 1-2 punch duos. Complex Criminal Scheme is a 3 half multi, doesn't count to venture whatsoever. And if you defend it, he gets to pull his other card, Mathematical Genius, which you play it. He gets to look at the next 6 cards, I think, in his deck, draw one of them, and then put Mathematical Genius right back on top of the deck. So you're just going to be seeing that time and time again. And it can just be brought right back, even if it's negated, using that half multi. So he's got some really interesting cards. You know, he's even got one where, you know, if either person concedes, you can just put, I think it's 3 cards back on the top of your deck. So all those any characters that you were stashing for a good hand, you get them again next turn. So there's a lot of really cool plays that he's got. But aside from the big -10, he's got 1-5 combat ventures. So that really leads into this whole intelligence stats, not being able to put up big numbers. So you need teammates around him that can. And at least at this point, there's not too many of them. So, I mean, I think he's tricky. I think there's decks that are going to want him. I haven't personally played against him or played with him enough to really find out where he fits. So I just put him in C.
I agree with most of what you said. You did miss his best card, Napoleon of Crime. Intellect card to defend the it's a straight avoid for the whole team for the rest of the round. So you can potentially set up some pretty awesome stuff there. But to your point, he's low on venture. For some reason, when I see people play him, they always throw that 3 half multi as the second hit on somebody instead of as a kill shot. So it always just gets taken and then they don't get to get Math Genius. I do think he's limited. You have to build your deck around him to get, and you've got to potentially run multiple Math Geniuses, which can, you know, let you cycle and delay, but usually that's bad to be just giving turns away. I mean, Dave had a deck that did it well sometimes, but the most success we've seen with Moriarty is him as a reserve character in Sean Ballantyne's deck, running just 1 Math Genius and being a backup 8 intellect for Sherlock, so that when he pops up, you can throw an 8 and then fetch another 8, and then you have Math Genius diluting your power pack for the next hand, which is really clever. And, you know, Moriarty would be proud. But I think having to build around him and some of his stuff being so situational, like you need the power cards, the int power cards with Napoleon of Crime. You need the good cards and card advantage to play the future laid plans or whatever it's called to stash cards for the future. You need, you know, sometimes that -10 venture is great, but you really wish it was an attack. So I almost have him at D, but thanks to Sean, I think there's something, and yeah, he'll have relevance in the future. I think people will come up with some kind of combo. So I'll put him at the bottom of C.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have him at C too. I think Mathematical Genius at the end of the game, being able to cycle through and just get, you know, basically have 2 8s. Like, so that's what you're doing. You're swapping it for another 8 is pretty big. But yeah, it's hard to build around him as the tent pole of your deck because he doesn't provide a lot of venture. So yeah, unfortunately, I think he just falls into C. Raw is an interesting character because he's an 18. He's an 8 character, a little overcosted at 20, but he doesn't bring, you know, venture, but he has one of those game-changing cards in his advanced universe to be able to give power card defense +2, which when you get to the late game power pack is pretty big. Eye of Sanket being able to nuke a card. It's one of those things like playing with Morgan where they place an 8 and they think their 8 is safe, and then you shapeshifters guys and steal the 8s out of their deck is pretty entertaining interaction if you've never done that to someone. Um, I have Raw as a B tier character. Um, yeah, I think he's a better reserve option than maybe he gets credit for, but yeah, I like him as a B character.
Go for it, Goof.
So I have him as B as well. I actually really like Raw as an 8 energy character. I think he has a lot of versatility, and even though he doesn't technically have a lot of venture, because his only venture card is that 6/8 half multi, he's also got the best heal in the game. Him and Watson both have it where it's heal himself or teammate of a hit from current battle or permanent record. So you can't use it to actually avoid something, but especially early on in an Asclepion build, they can throw a 11 at you and you can just get rid of it. And then that triggers and gives you a card and lets you attack as well. So like I think he gets a little bit of venture back because of that, depending on how you're playing him. And that can be even more beneficial if you're not playing Asclepion and you're more incentivized to pull off current battle hits as well. His other staff piece card, I think, is very good too. If you, there's the +2 to power card defenses for your team, but there's also every time you get a dupe, you get to look through your power pack and draw a non-dupe from your hand. So that incentivizes you to use an 8 early on, throw it as an attack, use it as a defense, because then from there on out, every single time that you get a dupe in a hand, you just pull that 8, not out of your deck, but out of your power pack. So you're not even diluting stuff later on. So I think that's a fantastic card. I think that's his best staff piece. And can really win you, games early on if you get it, or it's even really good in the power pack too to make sure that you're getting that pretty much full power pack hand. So I think he's got, a lot of grounds as a backup 8. I don't think he can tent pull things on himself, but if you have a whole bunch of other Asclepion characters where you're just making an ensemble cast anyway to see what you can do to heal everything off and then try and win by slow card advantage, kind of how Adam did in packs, I think he can still be pretty good. So I have him at B.
All right, well, throw him in B because you guys both voted B. But my hot take is, I think he's C. I think I've never seen him in a frontline deck that wasn't Asclepion, because you're just leaving one of his only 3 specials on the table. As it goes from great to mid if it's not Asclepion, and you're probably only gonna have one copy because you're not gonna want to dupe on that if it's not regrowing into another card. He does have the staff, which is really nice, but one of his staff pieces sucks. And he has nothing defensive other than that staff, which needs to be comboed with other cards. So I think the reason we see him is because he's kind of cute in reserve, and there's no backup 8 energy for which other than Zeus, who's really expensive, and which becomes his backup, not the other way around.
Yeah, I can see where you're going with C on that. I mean, on the staff head advanced universe card, I just try to build my deck so I'm not duping. I think he's good on like in the B tier because I want him as a reserve character, and he's got like pretty rounded stats, like in terms of being able to use cards from your. So yeah, I can definitely see where he gets why you'd put him in C. Yeah, his offense is really coming from the fact that he's an 8.
Yeah.
Like that's where he's coming. But he, like, as a reserve character, that inevitability at the end of the game with
I have Sekhmet
which with shards of the staff.
and that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, being able to have like 2 placed reserve, like 2 place cards on your reserve character. That's kind of why I'm thinking, like, in a set where there's more reserve characters than we've seen, but he just kind of, to me, fills a different role. I mean, I think having that 8 is kind of what pushes him for me. So,
But Raw doesn't excite me, but Robin Hood does. I think Robin Hood is awesome. Steals from the rich and gives to the poor. He's got some sick artwork. Both the flaming carriage behind him with the wheel on fire and the alts art from the price packs is incredible. He's way cool. I miss his inherent from playtesting. He had every time you forced an opponent to discard, you got to draw a card, which was
Wow.
way cool because he has 3 cards that force an opponent to discard. They're all, of course, avoidable and whatever, but way cool. He's got decent stats. He's great with Spartan. He's just a great combat support character. I think his only downside is that he draws a lot of aggro because of his teammate defense, the block a combat icon and draw a card. But he is a card advantage machine for 18. He has the 4, which can be sneaky land at the end of a round. Your opponent has to ditch their last card in their hand. He's got the Freya placed power card and draw 2, which is just hand winning when it lands and doesn't get avoided or negated. He's got a 3 multi, make 2 additionals, so he can kind of shotgun like the mob. And then he has a really nice 5, which can be comboed with a training or follow. It acts as a power card, so it could follow a teamwork, whatever. And then he has a regular place discard, which is non-1 per deck. So he's generally generating you card advantage, and he's going to bring heat to himself. I think he's one of those guys where you're like, man, he has 6 awesome specials, but he's usually the target, so I don't know if I'm going to run all 6. Maybe I'll have to cut one of them, and which one do I cut? Because they're all so freaking good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's wonderful, especially with, the shift event where you can shift away from him. He's great with the fairy so that you can guarantee use out of that other one. You can even use the any hero shift and then the avoid and draw, and it's just card neutral, 2 for 2. I think he's great. I think he's A tier.
Yeah, I agree. He's A tier. Every single time you see one of those, discard placed cards, I love them so much. You can get so much different value out of that. You can block their big attacks. You can get rid of that KL that's really scary to you. They're just so versatile. And if you're playing a deck where you have a lot of opportunities to discard your opponent's place cards, they're not going to want to place much, which by default is going to be getting you card advantage as you're placing more than they are. So it just pays a lot of dividends for an 18 threat character. So A tier.
Yeah, I agree. A tier. Being able to snipe place cards is huge. People get real comfortable with their kind of war chest of placed cards, and Robin Hood just doesn't let you play like that. So I think he really alters kind of the way you have to play against him. So yeah, I agree with A tier. Andrew, tell us about your boy, the Sheriff of Nottingham.
Sheriff, well, he doesn't seem like a reserve character, I'll tell you that. No, Sheriff's awesome. I first discovered him in I had Hercules, Sheriff, Mina, Baby Mob in the back, and Spartan, and it was just an offensive powerhouse. You got tons of venture from him. He's got flaming arrows, which is kind of a must block. It's sometimes a 2 for 1 if it can't be blocked, and it jams up a placement slot the next hand. He's got a 9. He's got the Professor X style +2 to all actions for your team, which, yes, it's not a venture card, but it pretty much means you win the hand most times. He's got taxes, which is another monster venture. Discard a power card, add it to yours. That can be a 16-point venture swing from 1 card. The only thing I don't like is Read the Bones, which, I guess you could play it in a Baker deck. Even I personally haven't played his -2 to universe cards or universe card bonuses, but it is potentially worth running. I mean, if you can keep him up. But the coolest thing is his inherent, that he can follow his own teamworks. I've had situations where, even at Nats, where I got down to him as my last character and I had an any power teamwork on him, and it's no longer a dead card because he can follow it himself. So I initially thought he was crap. Because he has no defensive card, I still don't think I can quite give him an A, but he's very close. I would put him at the very top of B tier. Almost A tier. It pains me to have him in the same section as Raw, but here we are.
What do you think, Robert?
Yeah, I like him in B. Um, he brings a lot of venture. Flaming Arrows, I think, is one of those cards that doesn't get the like play and kind of acclaim that it deserves. I mean, basically taking out special cards, like and getting that point swing is pretty good. It kind of becomes a must block.
Non one per deck too. That
Yeah.
card could be one per deck and no one would bat an eye.
Yeah. Well, I put him in A, so I can at least give you the spiritual win on that one. He's not an S tier character by any means, but he's an 18 stat character or 18 threat character that just brings so much heat. And he brings some versatility to your team because that +2 really helps out any character that's not him who's got speed. He's also 18 points and you can run his deck fairly slim. So if people really want to focus to get him out of the way, they're leaving probably your 10 pole next to him completely untouched. And so that's a sacrifice that I'm willing to make in a lot of games to lose Sheriff as opposed to Hercules or Omni-Man or whoever. And if you have any other way, like with Cthulhu or Joan, to get his cards out fast, those are incredible specials to follow up a team coordination card like that. He's just brings so much to the table. And I mean, he's got some interesting stats on him too. And I think the more that we see of a kind of a brute force combat type of build come up, especially in future sets when we have Battle Beast and Omni-Man, I think we're going to be seeing more of Sheriff. And I think we're going to be seeing more of that +2 and stealing power cards because he's the ultimate glass cannon of the set. I don't think there's any other character that does it better than him in ERB. But I'll put him in B for you guys. My original boy, one of the 3 characters when I opened up, I said, this is the character's cards that I want to play with. And I have from some of my first decks all the way up to Nats and will in the future.
He's awesome. Okay, Sherlock. Sherlock's a 19. He has an 8 and a 5. One of the only 2 8 stat 19 pointers in the set, I believe. He's got some cool stuff. I do think his negative is he's really locked to you got to play him with Asclepion or Baker Street, which is I mean it is what it is, but at least having 2 home base options is way better than 1. He's great because he's an 8 and he doesn't have to be your tent pole. So I think the flexibility of the 1 per deck true negates, the offensive negates, the 4 multi make additional, which is really annoying. The 5, which is kind of a must block even if it's not Baker because they don't want to show you all their cards. If you're playing him in Asclepion, not Baker, you don't really get the go through their deck thing. And purge 2 because it's not really worth it for just 1. And then he also has a pin, so if you run him lean and mean, you just Sherlock and target character can't attack. The battle of wits. So his only weakness really is that he doesn't bring a lot of venture. But he's cheap enough that I think that it's fine. You can get venture with other people. So I would put him at A. I see an argument for B too, but I think he's better than most of those B characters. I think he's an A.
Yeah, I use him as A. Like that's kind of where I've had him. Just he's a great second character, has some defense. That 4 multi really gives you some good spectrum pressure for a character. I mean, he looks in some ways situational because the natural first inclination is 221B, but using with Asclepion and taking like advantage of his offensive negate. I found some pretty good with Asclepion, so he's got defense in that regard. So yeah, I've got him as A as well.
I put him as B. I think he's a very solid character, and the 8 grid really helps him out. But all the things that he's doing, I wouldn't even say he's a jack of all trades, because really his only defensive card is, Battle of Wits if you're doing that proactively, or the one Protect Negate. So he's a target in a lot of cases, and that almost means that you have to bring other characters to try and keep him up, because he can fold pretty quick. He brings a lot of spectrum pressure, but not a lot of actual venture numbers. He's got a 4 and a 5, which is not nothing, better than we've seen of some other characters. But he really fits into that secondary role, whereas, hey, I've got this backup 8. I've got this negate that's going to keep me out of situations. I can pressure you a little bit. So he does a lot of solid things, but I don't think he does anything great unless you're pairing him with Baker, in which case you get a little bit more out of that. I think he's going to pair well if we get a intelligence character that actually can bring a little bit more venture to the game. But now I think he's solid. He's seen a lot because he's got a negate and because he's got an 8. So I'd put him at B, but we got 2 votes for A here, so we'll put him up closer to the top. Which brings us to our next D-tier character, Sun Wukong. This guy sucks. He's just asking for you to lose, right? Right? That's bad. And I don't think there's going to be any argument on this. You've got a shift, you've got an 11, you've got a lockout, you've got a 6 that also can discard, you've got a team avoid. Like, this guy's a monster with an 8 and a 6. That's true that he used to be 23 points, and you can argue that he wouldn't be bad at that even now.
Yeah, he's clearly an S tier character at 22 points, the 8 and the 6. I mean, there's a reason you kind of build around his cards, and he has so many 1 per decks that it pushes you to not build your deck in a way you dupe anyways.
Yep, advantage over Leo right there is like, yep, no dupes needed. I've seen a couple people run dupes of the 6 to get a universe card because the second one's never expected, but this running lean and mean 5 or 6 cards and they're all good.
Didn't even mention it, but he's got the full heal as well, so he's got a whole way to keep himself alive, because you're not going to want to pepper him with hits, because eventually he's going to just be low on cards and just go right back up to full, and then you spent all these big chunky attacks to try and bring him down, and it goes nowhere. So,
and he can even shift the hits to himself halfway through a round and then clean it all up to have a monster venture come back. Yeah.
So I mean, just him, John Carter, and Morgan have got those full heals, and honestly, I think his has been the one that comes up the most and is just the most worthwhile. It's fantastic, and just means that you're pretty much going to be having him there to fight for you and bring his 8s all game long. He's so easy, yes.
All right, one of my favorites back in playtesting, Tars Tarkus. Back in the day, his I keep saying this. His 6 used to work with Deja on the team, and also back in my day, the Deja was 17 points, so you could stash her in reserve. You didn't have to pair him with John Carter to get the full value out of his kit. Now, if Tars was 19, him and John would fit nicely into a lot of decks, because then you could play like Hercules with them, or Wukong, and then somebody 16 in the back or whatever. But as of right now, your only real option is like Tars, John Carter, and Leo. And it's slow and no negate, and it has a lot of problems. So Tars has 1 phenomenal card. Opponent must discard 2 placed of his choice, which is just wonderful. And that can be a round winning card. But other than that, he just has a pile of 6s, one of which can defend the team only if John Carter's with him. He has an inherent, which is like not great. It's kind of like a Dracula inherent. You mostly forget it's there. And then he has a stop a universe card, which is also great. But being a 20-pointer, like you compare him to like Nemo or Count or King Arthur, and you're just like, All those guys are bringing more. They're bringing more and cooler stuff and bigger stuff. And yeah, I like my boy Tars, but I still stick him in D tier. There's a reason that he has not made hardly any tournament appearances and has not done well in them.
We don't have a foregone conclusion here. I'm not going to build an S or an F tier for this either. I don't think he deserves it. I think that he's playable, and I think that he's on the very low end of that because he is 20 points. You know, I could even see an argument where John Carter is the 20 points out of the two, you know, between him and Tars, because John Carter's kit is just so much more rounded. But I think that Tars brings something that not a lot of the combat characters brings, at least so far in this set. And there's a lot of versatility to his kit. The discard 2, I mean, we've just talked about how good Robin Hood is, and this is literally the best version of that that's in the set, I would say. You know, the count one arguably is better, but you're just burning off any 2 cards you want is incredible. His two of his 6s are offsuits. So if you are building him with John Carter to get full effect of everything, those are 6s that you really want to have in your deck, and your opponent pretty much is going to have to spend some premium stuff to block them because they're not just sort of that offsuit 4. If he is with John, that 6 becomes really nice. I don't know why it's not like Zoro's where that one's a 5 half multi with no restrictions, but Tars is a 6 any power with restrictions. That seems a little bit weird to me. But, you know, I feel like because of the strength of his discard 2, he gets some heat. So even if you were just to put him in the deck without John Carter, I think that a single 6 in your deck would still be worthwhile. He's got a +5 to venture. So like if you're building him in a certain way, that can help out a little bit too with some Baker. So like he's got a lot of cool options. He's got a little bit in the defense, a little bit in the utility. So he brings enough, I think, that keeps him out of D. And I think that the more combat brute force, or if we get any sort of characters that do any sort of basic universe synergy like Witch does, but in one of his suits, we're going to be wanting to build with him a little bit more.
Sorry, Goof, I got him in D.
I wasn't surprised.
Yeah, I don't see a situation where you would ever bring Tars over Three Musketeers, Van Helsing, Zorro, or King Arthur. Like if you're in the market for a 7 combat. I mean, even if you want the 6 brute force, Musketeers is 5, so you're pretty much there for the most part. I think at 20 threat level, he's overcost for what he brings, and that's kind of the problem. If he was 19, I think he'd get, you know, maybe get a little more look, but as he stands, I just don't see a reason why I would ever bring him in front of, you know, 3 or 4 other characters. Tarzan, I think he just having one of the more unique specials in the one-on-one. Tarzan's a character.
Match.
When the more I see him and play him, the more more I like him. Being able to do that cage match style and bet big, like if you see a 6 max character, being able to have the plan of betting huge and then just burying them under 7s because he has so many of them. I think I've got him. Oh man, I've got him in B. Like I could see the argument for A, but yeah, I've got him in B. Tell me I'm wrong, because I might be.
Is he
Go
wrong
for it,
yet?
Goof. I don't think he's wrong. Not on this one. Yeah, I like Tarzan a lot too. He doesn't quite break through to A. He's got a really cool inherent, which a lot of people forget about, which is really relevant with like shifting stuff, you know, which as soon as we're going to get next set the green farm, you're going to have even more shifts. But as of right now, you can do the any hero shift or witch or Billy with pals, whatever. You can shift that Wukong 11 over to him and then just block it with a 1 intellect, which is pretty sick. He's got fairly nice stats. He's combat, so he's got a lot of playmates this set. He's got a pile of venture, a couple different 7s and a 5. One of the 7s and the 5 you really want to stop, or it'll jam up cards. And the 1v1 me is awesome. And then he has a personal avoid, so you kind of want to leave him alone. And then he also has some team defense too. He's got the stop a teamwork for anybody on your team. So I think he's very well rounded. He's nothing making him spectacular than some of the others, but I have him at the top end of B.
Yeah, I definitely see the argument for putting him in B. I placed him in A in a sort of a low end area there, just because he brings so much offense to the table. But he is kind of, sort of a 2-trick type pony outside of the 1-for-1 dual card. He can throw hits. He's even got a cool reserve placement, since he can throw his 5 intelligence from reserve and just lock up a character's placed cards, which is very nice and can be pretty unexpected. And, certain decks are just going to want to avoid him. And if we see kind of a resurgence of teamworks a little bit more, I know Ricky played a tournament-winning PAX deck with a lot of teamworks, but there hasn't been that many decks like that since. If we see more of that, I think we'll see more Tarzan, because 3 colors, teamwork, defense, and potential kill shot, especially if one of their weaker characters, can be really beneficial. We'll land in the end on D for
Top
us.
of B, though. Top of B.
Yeah.
All right. Mummy. Mummy, very similar to Mina, both in stats and specials. He's got a 7, though, which is pretty relevant. He's got one of the best team defense cards in the game, block and attack on a teammate with a power card. So it can be a naked power card or one that follows a teamwork, and you draw a card. So just because the fact that card exists, he's going to draw aggro. And he has a really, really nice inherent where he needs an energy icon to be KO'd, which makes him an excellent tank. So he is great at doing his job. In addition, his attacks are pretty much offsuit. He has a 3 that can be thrown post-concession, intellect. He's got the 7 that can heal him. And then he's got a 5 that can heal him. Not as good. That one's permanent record only, but still, that one's on suit. And then he's also got a negate, which you can play defensively as a 2-for-1. So I see a little bit of confliction with, you kind of want to sacrifice a small brute force card with that, and that's his best stat. So there's a little bit of like, sometimes that's annoying, but you can often just use like an any power 5 or a multi 3 or something to use it. But with all the healing, he's great in Asclepion there. I think he's solid pretty much anywhere. The only card of his that sucks is the swap hits or swap full damage, from him and an ally, which just isn't worth a card unless you could do it defensively. But yeah, he's very, very similar to Mina. I think he belongs right next to her in A tier because of that 7 brute force. He's just as good, if not an edge better.
So I placed him in B tier, actually. And this was one of the 3 characters that I looked at his set and I was just ecstatic and wanted to play Mummy a lot. I think that he is weaker than Mina and deserving of B tier, because even though he's got that 7, he fits kind of better almost in a more like energy oriented deck, where you're probably wanting to put more of those lower brute force cards into it because they're not really so much of a main suit. He can take hits, and that's fantastic. He's got that team avoid card, which is great, but his attacks are really on suit. I mean, aside from that 3, the 7 energy and the 5 brute force really mean that, at least to me, like his offensive powers are so much weaker than Mina's are. And you're getting the defensive version of him instead, because he can't destroy opponents' cards. He can't he doesn't have a sort of an offsuit threat really, aside from the post concession 3. So he's really there to keep your teammates up and soak hits, and he does that very well. But it's a little bit more one dimensional in my mind, and that places him at B. His negate is also not nearly as good as Mina's is.
I've got him in A tier. He kind of solves the problem that Mina has in terms of being easily killable. I mean, there are some decks because of his inherent that just straight will never kill Mummy.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think kind of looking at the meta right now, we're seeing a lot of cards like EFL, Harness the Wind, whatever. His negate playing it offensively, you're typically fine with that. I will gladly trade 1 for 1 on your premier deck card with one of his offensive negates. When you look at it initially, you want to kind of think like, oh, okay, I need these lower cards to pitch to it. And I don't think you do. I think that's kind of a trap that maybe people kind of get, tunnel vision into. But I think he solves Mina's biggest problem. I think he's a very good like third option character. Like he's like the number 3
Mm-hmm.
kind of character on your team. I've got him in A. I mean, I see what you're saying about the 7. Like, yeah, you're right. He's kind of a defensive character or a character that typically goes in energy shells. But when he's going in an energy deck, his 5 brute force attack can almost becomes the tertiary suit, because typically most of the energy characters, their secondary suit is intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of becomes that, gives that little spectrum pressure. So yeah, I've got him in A.
Cool. Real quick before we move on, I do want to say I think it's such a cool deck, like a construction thing that they did in ERB, to have these 2 extremely similar characters that are kind of 2 sides of the same coin, and you get to choose like which version of the kit that you want for the deck that works for you. Like if they were more different, I don't think we'd be making the same comparison, but because they really have such a similar suite of cards you get to, and it's like, do I want the offensive version? Do I want the defensive version? And they're both solid, and they're both great choices, and they both give you a threat back. So I love that aspect.
Totally agree.
3 Musketeers, the venture generating machine. I'll start with them. It's this. I feel like this is one of those characters like you could make the argument for very strong. They have defense. They generate a lot of offense. I like that they have kind of the spectrum pressure that most characters do not have. I don't think their inherent's nice. It's a nice little token thing, just because teamworks aren't as prevalent. But anytime you can just basically not have to worry about teamworks in some regard are good. I've got them in B. It's tough. Again, it's the same problem with TARS. Like at 20 points, that's just such a jammed up slot, and every threat point matters. You kind of really need a plan with him. And looking at the other 20-point characters, Nemo, Count, it's just like, it's tough. King Arthur, who you cut. So yeah, I've got Musketeers in the B tier.
Go for it, Pierre.
I had a rationale very similar to Tarzan with this, and I had him placed with A. He brings so much color to the table. I mean, he's got the most venture output of any character in this entire set. And it's not just multiple in one color or anything either. He's got 7 combat, he's got a 6 brute force, he's got a 5 intelligence, he's got an 8 multi. So he's putting up pressure both for cumulative and for spectrum. And, in a more teamwork heavy type of deck, you can just be adding to that again and again as you're placing, your single, 8 brute force Hercules or something like that's teamwork onto him now if you get that in play. I don't think that card itself is fantastic, but I think just that the skills that the Three Musketeers brings to the table with not only the venture, but also that the team defense, the 5 that can, if you're really behind, scale all the way up as far as an 11, technically. I think that lets you do a lot of other things with the other characters on your team because you're not as worried about putting up the numbers. You're able to do it quickly, you're able to do it powerfully in a threatening way, and now your other teammates can either add to um, that component or they can run something different, and that gives them a lot of space to do that. So I put them in low A tier, but I can easily see the B rating as well.
Yeah, back in playtesting, they had a 19 threat and then 1 less intelligence, and so they were a powerhouse. They brought quite a bit of venture. I agree with Rob that when you put them at 20, like on paper they're great and they have a ton of venture, but I somehow always gravitate to King Arthur, Count, Nemo, sometimes even Van Helsing in that slot. When you're paying 20 points for a non-8 character, I just find them too boring and too vanilla. They're just a pile of stats. There's nothing tricky. There's nothing unfair. There's nothing that crazy. So I also have them at B. Time Traveler. We have a max 6 offensively. He has a 5 energy, a 6 intellect, and he can block with 7s and 8s defensively. Super, super weird kit. He has a 2-for-1 plus 10 to venture. You got to sacrifice that card and a power card to do it. And it has like a weird timing thing where you can like pre-play it and then cash it in later. Can defend himself with 7s and 8s, which is good, I guess, in an intellect deck. But as we've talked about, they struggle with venture, and his only venture is a 6 or an 8 against high energy characters. So I guess if Zeus is meta and against the witch, well, even against the witch, you throw it as an 8 at her and then she shifts it away and it becomes a 6. So he has a really bomb 1 per deck like Tars, fry 3 place cards on your opponent. They get to choose, but still 1, 2, 3, like that can just be absolutely devastating. But a personal avoid, and then his heal doesn't work on himself. It's like a heal others. I think if that heal worked on himself, I don't think that would make them broken by any means. I wish they had a full heal, like, Watson or Raw, but it kind of is what it is. Aside from that blow up thing, like in the future, when we have events that are potentially game warping, I think that his place a card and then negate an event can be huge. And I think there's definitely a spot for him in Legacy to, get rid of a KO a character event, or no teamworks may be played, or no card with this icon can attack. Any of those crazy events, I think that's relevant. But uh, I think he's D. I think other than that 1 card, he's not bringing anything.
I think he's D as well. Yeah, discarding 3 cards, generating card advantage is great. He's a character you'll want to come back and evaluate as the game goes on to see if Harbinger's Warning is good against events, but as he is now, he's an easy D.
Yeah, I think he would have been a good character to consider at 17 points instead of the 18 that he is. Every one of his cards is somewhat limited. His 10 to venture costs you a card 1 round and an action. His attack could also just be a 6. His discard 3 place, they get to choose. So like nothing is actually like fully benefiting you. And, I would want to put him in a Skeleton. I've even got a deck with him, but that limits where you're going to go. And then, if you want to put him with Raw in this set, then you're getting another energy attack and you just get yourself even more open to the Reaper. So he just doesn't deserve to go anywhere outside of D.
Also, most competitive threat slot at 18. There's 10 18s in this set.
Yep. Like his one benefit, if you put him in a Zeus deck and, run another, 16, then you can put like Morgan with him and kind of make the points work out. I'm not enamored with the time traveler, even though I've kind of got my name similar to him. Van Helsing, though, is a very interesting character. He's the most utility-oriented of the combat characters in my mind. He can negate, one of the very, very few combat negates in the game, certainly the only one in this set. He's got KL, board wipe, remainder of game, remainder of battle wipe. That can be extremely handy. And his attacks are very tricky. He's got the 6 half multi that is energy and combat. That's pretty fantastic. You like having a 6 half multi on there. And unlike Raw, he's actually got a second attack that does some venture too. And that's I think it was a Jay-Z code. You guys will have to help me if I'm wrong with that. But it lets you make a cheap energy attack. So again, an offsuit color, or your additional attack is a power card that can't be defended by a special. And that just opens up so many holes in their deck. And now they're forced to, if they had a fairy protection waiting, you can't even use it to defend. So it can get some really cool trick shots on your opponent. He's also pretty tanky because he has an only universe lockout. So weak to teamworks, but there's not a lot of those so far. He's got staying power. So I think he's a really good character. I think he's hard to slot in a lot of the times with, just being 20 threat and having a lot of competition. And I think the more we find the need for that utility instead of just sort of having a kind of a blunt brute force deck, the more that we'll see him. But I put him at D for good. You don't want him in every deck, but you really want him in some decks.
3 different paths. He's got one of the best cards in the set, the monster hunting expert, where he can just wave away all placed and in play remainder of battle, remainder of game cards. So that can just be game winning or hand winning. Can also heal a bunch of hits like we talked about earlier. He's got a 1 per deck negate, which is really interesting on a combat character, and he can protect himself. So I think the only downside is he's not bringing a ton of venture because he's got a 3, a 5, and a 6. You could double up on any of those, but that's really his only downside. I'm honestly surprised we don't see more of him because that ability to assassinate characters is really, really nice. I don't quite think he's A tier, but I think he's right there with Arthur or 3 Musk in B. Very flexible utility.
Yeah, I agree. He's a solid B tier character. I mean, I think looking at Monster Hunting Expert, like right now in the meta as it stands, because of Joan and Wicked Witch, like he's a, we've kind of talked about before where cards like Monster Hunting Expert is either like exactly what you want, or sometimes it looks like a dead card. But when you look at how the meta has kind of gravitated towards the shifts, that makes these cards better and more usable. So I think right now he's like a 20-point option you want to consider. I mean, if you're in the combat suit, he's probably going in my deck. Like if you are going the combat route. So yeah, the JW, it's great in Legacy because Legacy you're relying primarily on special cards as your defense, and that's kind of not the case here. So I think it's a little less powerful. I mean, the fact that it's offsuit and you could follow up with a kill shot kind of can force your opponent into an awkward position. But yeah, no, great character all around. I think B's solid. Victory Harbin. Tell us about one of Doug's favorite ERB characters.
I'm very conflicted with Victory. She seems great. She has really nice stats, 2 5s and a 7, flexibility of upfront and reserve, and that's what you see at face value. But I really don't think that she has that many options up front, because up front she is a powerhouse and she's cheaper, but she's also just a magnet and just gets blown away so quickly. Her only personal protection card is, I think, No Universe. So unlike Van Helsing's, which is only Universe, it's not even going to get value. If it's placed, it's going to be so easy to play around. She's just going to go down so fast. She has a 3 multi make an additional, which is really nice. She has a 7 energy, which is really nice. It's also kind of a trap playing that from reserve, I think, because it's still just a 7 and it's a 2-for-1 to throw it from back there. She has a really nice, cool fry all the intellect cards in your hand, which I think will be relevant next set, and so it might be worth looking at. But I really could only see her succeeding in like a hyper aggro deck because her best card is the draw 4. But their second best card, the Teammate Avoid with an intelligence icon, it's nowhere near as good as Robin Hood's because it's not a combat icon. But also it only works on teammates, and she costs 20 in the back. And if you're going to spend 20 on your reserve, why are you not playing Morgan? So yeah, I think that although she has some really fun, unique stuff, and some people think she's really slept on, I think that she's just a straight up C. She's not terrible, but she's not quite good.
I had her in a B tier. I can see what you're saying, though. There's definitely holes in both sides of her kit, whether that's reserve or if you're playing her on the front line. I think that she's got a surprising amount of power. I mean, the 3 multi and the 7, there's a lot of intelligence characters that bring a lot of spectrum threat, and she really plays into that very well. If you were to run her and Sherlock together, now you've got 2 full multis as non-1 for decks. Paired her with Joan in the Nats. She was part of my my Joan Cthulhu deck, and that extra speed really helped out in throwing and adding that pressure. And people weren't exactly sure where they wanted to attack, because if you want to get Victory gone to get rid of her draw 4, then you're leaving a lot bigger threats up, while she's just able to pepper you with some kind of trick shot hits. So I think that she's good. I think there's some versatility. There are times, especially in intelligence, where you're a little overloaded with points anyway, so she can fit really well in the back and be a solid character. So I think she's going to find a lot of play, but I would say very low end of B.
Yeah, I have her in C. Front line, she can't defend herself. Her card advantage is kind of situational. You you have to discard a card to take advantage. If you want to play it in reserve, you got to discard another. I think her best card might be Fires of Halos. Opponent must discard all cards in hand with a intelligence icon, and that's situational. She's like one of those characters that's either like, oh my God, she's incredible, or sometimes you're sitting there and just like, oh my God, she's so mid. So, yeah, I mean, since she can't defend herself, I mean, you're relying on the power cards and hoping you have a 6 or 7 to keep her alive. But yeah, I've got her at C. Next, we have our next S tier character. This is an easy one, Wicked Witch, at 19 with an 8 with a shift, an 8 multi and a 7. I mean, you can just run her and snipe a placed card. She just kind of does everything here. I mean, she is a magnet every time at the beginning of the game. The first 2 battles, where there's actually action happening, you're always going after Wicked Witch. I typically tend to like her with 4 specials, lean and mean, mitigate that disadvantage if she does get taken out early. But yeah, she's an easy S tier. She's undercosted.
I'm surprised that we're not seeing more characters like Robin Hood and Mina to combat her. And, she's cashing that harness to win for a really important round, and you can just blow it up early. Like, that works against Sun Wukong's heal. That works against Joan of Arc's EFL if it's not out on table. I'm really surprised we're not seeing more of those aggro type cards because, when Witch is on the table, she brings everything else. And, even without an EFL, if you're able to torch that place card, you're still going to want to take her down, but that's going to open up a lot more options for you. But next up is Zeus, the only 23-pointer in this set. And I think that he's worth the cost. I mean, he's got an 8 and he's got a backup 6. And he's got an infinite number of Thunderbolts, it seems like. The only 9 non-1 per deck in this set that really can bring down some characters, but unfortunately, it can also help bring down Zeus, because then you can't defend him with special cards. And you're left with heals, you're left with shifts, and you're left with negates after that. So it's a ticking time bomb as soon as you actually throw one of those lightning bolts. He's also got a really cool target character may not attack modal card where you can do that or destroy someone's allies, which can be really helpful. He's got a venture reset card. He's got Hera, which is one of the ways you actually keep him alive if you're chucking those lightning bolts, because now you've got a 10 plus damage shield that can't be negated that's sitting in front of him. He's got a Jealous God, which is kind of a garbage card. You have to target another character that's got a grid higher than his, and you get +2 to attacks against them. But really, you want the defense, not the offense that it brings. So it's really not that useful. I think he's got a lot of potential, but he's just got so many weaknesses. All the KL cards that'll wipe off all the lightning bolts that are in the game. He's weak against Raw if you happen to place one of those lightning bolts. Like, there's just weakness after weakness after weakness that comes up with Raw that makes it really hard to justify the 23 points that you've built your entire deck around. I love the artwork on his ultra rare, but I think he just sits at B, and that might be generous.
It's so thematic and awesome because he's just so egotistical with the Jealous God, with the Thunderbolt. Suddenly he's not protected. His inherent where he can't throw energy teamworks because he needs all the glory. So awesome. And I think there's potentially a place for him in the future. And I've seen a lot of players get in a spot where, like, he plays Hera and they try and ignore it, and then all of a sudden they have to deal with it in a power pack hand, and Zeus can bet big and bring it back. But I've yet to see a deck where if Zeus falls, the deck can do anything. So he's kind of like such a linchpin, and having the negative of not being able to protect your linchpin is really a huge drawback.
Yeah, I'll go with C. I find him situational, and you have to build around him. So that's a tough place to be at 23 points. Zorro kind of finishing up here. I've got him in very strong. He's got offense. He's got defense. He's only 20 points. So, Spartan Training Ground can really open up with him. He's got some offsuit. He's an A character, I think. He kind of does a little bit of everything, especially at an 8.
Yeah, I think he's Three Musketeers, but with an 8. So that bumps him up to A. He's very similar. Lots of big hits, lots of spectrum options, a little 5 to block for the team. He can sneak a venture up with that 7. Yep, and then he's got an 8, so he's great as like the Sherlock for combat, like a backup 8. I think he's great. A tier.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys. I think that's probably the best way to say it is, the Sherlock of combat. If you got the points in the deck, he's just so easy to slot in, and he's going to do pretty much everything that you want. Venture, defense.
All right. Well, we are running long. So if you ever thought that we didn't give enough content, you certainly got it this episode. So I'll close it out here for all of us. Pierre, Andrew, and I. Thank you for listening. Give us your feedback. Let us know what you think about our tier list. Tell us why we're right. Or if you, for some reason, disagree, tell us why we're wrong. Hopefully we'll see everyone at in Columbus or Canada. I won't be in Canada, but I hope you guys will come visit me in Columbus. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good night.